Herkese günaydın. Umarım sesim sizlere iyi geliyordur. Önceki webinarlarımıza ve proje yazma eğitimlerimize düzenli katılan katılımcılarımıza tekrardan merhaba demek istiyorum. Ayrıca tabii ki aramıza ilk kez katılan, daha önceki herhangi bir online ya da stage etkinliğimize katılmamış katılımcılarımıza da yine bu vesileyle hoş geldiniz demek isterim. Bugünkü etkinliğimizin adı Ufuk Avrupa kapsamında EIC Hızlandırıcı Programı için tam başvuru teklifi hazırlanması konulu bir KOBİ web semineri. Bu projemizin proje yazma etkinliklerinin 9.'su olma özelliğini taşımaktadır. Daha önce etkinliklerimize katılan katılımcılarımız sıklıkla takip ettiği üzere ismim Kemal Onur Güngör. Bugün sizler için Ufuk 2020'de Türkiye Faz 2 projesi kapsamında Avrupa Birliği'nin hızlandırıcı programına başvurmayı gerçekleştirmeyi düşünen KOBİ'lerimize yönelik bir etkinlik planladık. Etkinliğimiz projemizin geniş kapsamlı KOBİ destek bileşeni altında yer alan, daha önce de bahsettiğim gibi 15 proje yazma eğitimi serisinin 9.'su olma özelliğini taşımaktadır. Proje ekibi ve TÜBİTAK adına sizleri etkinlikte ağırlamaktan memnuniyet duyduğumuzu belirtmek isterim. Kısaca etkinliğimizin sorumlu kuruluşlarından bahsetmek gerekirse, projemiz ve dolayısıyla da etkinlik Avrupa Birliği ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti tarafından ortak finanse edilen ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Sanayi ve Teknoloji Bakanlığı'nın yürütücüsü olduğu Rekabetçi Sektörler Programı kapsamında desteklenen Ufuk 2020'de Türkiye Faz 2 projesi kapsamında gerçekleşmektedir. Projemizin ana yararlanıcısı TÜBİTAK'tır. Daha önceden etkinliklerimize katılan katılımcılarımızın aşina olduğu üzere pandemi dolayısıyla bir yılı aşkın süredir etkinliklerimizi çevrim içi uygulamalar aracılığıyla gerçekleştiriyoruz. Dolayısıyla yine daha önceden etkinliklerimize katılan katılımcılarımızın bugün kullandığımız Zoom uygulamasına aşina olduğunu düşünmekteyiz. Fakat yine aramızda uygulamaya aşina olmayanlar var ise yahut etkinlik süresince herhangi bir teknik sorun yaşar iseniz sizlere proje ekibinden ben, Tuğçe Hanım ve Şelal Hanım ve Anıl Bey olmak üzere Zoom uygulamasının alt menüsüne yer alan Q&A butonu aracılığıyla herhangi bir teknik sorunuz kapsamında etkinliğe dair yardımcı olmak isteriz. Etkinliği biraz daha detaylandırmak gerekirse EIC Hızlandırıcı Programı Horizon 2020 programında olduğu gibi Yeni Ufuk Avrupa Programı'nda temel unsurlarından biri olmaya devam ediyor sizlerin de bildiğiniz üzere. Lakin altını çizmek gerekirse başvuru sürecinde önemli değişiklikler bulunmakta. Daha önce 6 Nisan'da gerçekleştirdiğimiz web seminerimiz genel çerçevede bu durumu, bu programı özetlemiş ve yine geçtiğimiz hafta 28 Nisan günü gerçekleştirdiğimiz proje yazma eğitimimizde ilk aşama başvuru sürecine odaklanmıştı. Bu iki etkinliğin kaydını da daha sonra sizlerle paylaşacağımız YouTube kanalımız üzerinden tekrardan istediğiniz zaman izleyebilirsiniz. Bugünkü etkinliğimiz ise ikinci aşama başvuru sürecine odaklanacaktır. Yine kümülatif olarak ilerleyen etkinlik serisini tamamlamak adına 21 Mayıs tarihinde 16 Haziran'daki ilk hızlandırıcı cut-off tarihinden önce teklifleri incelemek için son bir etkinliğimiz daha olacaktır. Bunun da başvurularını ya da başvuru yapmak için süreci Ufuk 2020 uzantılı TÜBİTAK web sitesi üzerinden ki linklerini sizlerle gün içerisinde paylaşacağız. Ayrıca proje web sitemizden takip edebilirsiniz. Son olarak yine eklemek gerekirse benzer web semineri ve proje yazma eğitim modelini gelecekteki cut-off tarihlerinden önce yine uygun tarihlerde proje ekibi ve TÜBİTAK'ın kararlarıyla uygun tarihleri belirleyerek tekrarlayacağız. Bugünkü webinar için bize katılmasını beklediğimiz 100'den fazla KOBİ'miz var. Yaklaşık 250'de başvuru aldık. Bu nedenle webinar boyunca TÜBİTAK çalışanları, TÜBİTAK yetkilileri ve proje ekibi Q&A butonu vasıtasıyla proje ekibinin teknik sorulara verdiği yanıtlara ek olarak bütün tematik EIC hızlandırıcı programa dair sorular konusunda sizlere yardımcı olacaktır. Kısaca etkinlikte yer alan uzmanlarımızı tanıtmak gerekirse, bugün bizlere İngiltere'den projemizin kilit uzmanı, KOBİ uzmanı Philip Solden, Yunanistan'dan proje uzmanlarından Grigoris Kostas, Türkiye'den SME Instrument uzmanı Serkan Bolat ve TÜBİTAK'tan Avrupa Yenilik Konseyi EIC Ulusal İrtibat Noktaları temsilcileri Sayın Merve Polat, Sayın Merve Diyar ve Sayın Tarık Şahin katılmaktadırlar. Ayrıca yine proje destek ekibinden TÜBİTAK'a destek sağlama adına Sayın Tuğçe Er Yılmaz ve Sayın Şelale Dağalp de bizler birlikte bulunmaktadırlar. Etkinliğin ana amacı olarak bu sabahki etkinliğin sonunda yeni programa başvurma konusunda hepinizin daha iyi bilgilendirileceğini ve bunun sonucunda daha güçlü bir başvuru yapacağını ümit etmekteyiz. Son olarak proje kapsamındaki tüm diğer gerçekleşen komik web seminerlerinde olduğu gibi bugünkü etkinliğin kaydı da etkinlikte gerçekleşen sunumlarla birlikte etkinlikten hemen sonra daha önce bahsettiğim web sitemizde ve YouTube kanalımızda paylaşılacaktır. Proje web sitemizin ve YouTube kanalımızın detayları chat box'tan takip edebileceğiniz linkler olacaktır. Sizlere bunu proje ekibi olarak sağlayacağız. Ben sözü daha da fazla uzatmadan TÜBİTAK'tan Sayın Merve Hanım'a devretmek istiyorum. Merve Hanım, söz sizindir.
Thank you, Kemal Bey, for the introduction. Now I will continue with in English because the event is going to be in English. Let me share my screen. I think you can see it without any problem.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to our EIC Accelerator training event, which will focus on the second stage of the application process. My name is Merve Polat, and I'm the National Contact Point for European Innovation Council on Horizon Europe program. And we are working all together with my colleagues, Tarık Şahin and Merve Diyar. Before starting my presentation, I would like to remind you that me and my colleagues will be here with you throughout the event. You can send your questions from Q&A section, either in English or Turkish. We will be pleased to help your questions answered. I would like to begin my presentation by giving brief information about the framework programs. It is the R&D funding program of European Union and started in 1984. And if you look at the timeline here, we are in the 9th framework program now, and it is called Horizon Europe and started in the beginning of this year, actually. Turkey involved in the framework programs in 2004 during the 6th framework program. And since that day, framework programs has been coordinated by TÜBİTAK through a dedicated national coordination office. There are some major changes on the pillars of the new framework program compared to the previous one. And also in the EIC, if you look at specifically to EIC, we can see some changes from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe. Actually, EIC was a pilot program in the last 3 years, but now it is in its full form. Before, we were under the industrial leadership pillar, named as Innovation in SMEs and Access to Risk Finance. Moreover, we also had the former FED, Future and Emerging Technologies program. Now, in Horizon Europe, all of these three came together to form the EIC component of the Innovative Europe pillar. Here you can see how EIC is structured on Horizon Europe program. There are three major programs which are Pathfinder, Transition, and Accelerator. And for all of these programs, there are both open funding and strategic challenges options. This presentation is more about who we are and what we do. That's why I'm not going to go into the details of these programs, but I strongly recommend you to take a look at our previous events about the details of these programs that you can find on Turkey in Horizon 2020 website. In addition to these programs, there are also EIC prizes and EIC Community and Business Acceleration Services as other components of EIC on Horizon Europe program. I would also like to share some information with you about who we are. We are the members of National Coordination Office for Horizon Europe. And as you can see here, we have a dedicated website for this purpose, which is ufuk2020.tr. And on the main page on the right side, you can see KOBİ Destekler section. And from this section, you can find all details about us. However, I want to remind you that our new website for Horizon Europe is under construction now, and it will be launched very soon. So now you can register our website and select the newsletter options that fit you best. Then this information will be automatically transferred to the new Horizon Europe website, and you will keep receiving all news and updates. If you go into KOBİ Destekler section, you will see more detailed information about our team, and you can find some specific news and updates also. On the right-hand side on this page, you can find our contact details. So again, we would like you to register our website and contact us anytime for your questions. On the main page, on the upper right corner, there is also Kim Kimdir, who is who section. From this section, you can also find our contact details together with the details of other national contact points for Horizon Europe. In order to encourage the participation of Turkish partners in the framework programs, we provide some supports and awards as the National Coordination Office. These supports and awards programs are dedicated to SMEs, academicians, and institutions. Increasing the quality of the proposals submitted to the framework programs is another purpose of our National Coordination Office. And in addition to this, we also want to increase the leadership and the number of Turkish coordinators in the programs in this way. As I mentioned, we also have award programs to encourage successful people to continue their works. And these programs are being updated right now in order to be ready for Horizon Europe. And actually, they are on their way to be launched. So we will see what kind of programs we will be offering to support the Turkish ecosystem in Horizon Europe program. Finally, I would also like to briefly mention about the InnoSub calls. If you go into the related link here, from here, you will see that there are some other opportunities in addition to the Horizon Europe program. You can submit your proposals to these calls as well. Of course, if you believe that they fit into your research areas, I think they are good starting points to be prepared for Horizon Europe EIC calls. Here you can see our social media account details. Ufuk Arpatiyar is our official Twitter account, and we also have a dedicated LinkedIn account for Horizon Europe. All of the news and updates are also being shared through our social media accounts, so we recommend you to follow us. Thank you for listening to my short presentation. I hope that I have encouraged you to take another look at what TÜBİTAK has to offer SMEs, especially on EIC Accelerator support. I shall be here with the project team during the event to respond to your questions. I would now like to hand over to Philip and Grigoris to take us through the second stage application process and provide you with an insight into some of the aspects that will help to strengthen your bids for support. Philip, over to you.
Çok teşekkürler Merve. Günaydın, merhaba. Okay, there we are. Hello again. Nice to see that we have a good audience for our event this morning. First of all, I think I'm sure that you'll be delighted to see that TÜBİTAK are well on board with Horizon Europe and have much to offer. And I would certainly recommend that you look at what they have to offer, because it could get you well on the way to a successful bid on Horizon. Today's event, the objectives are, if you're familiar with our events, similar to before, we're providing, first of all, information on the project Horizon Europe and Accelerator, providing details on the second stage application, the full application for support, looking at trying to get it right in terms of the content. And we also have with us this morning Serkan Wallet, who will give us an insight into some of the issues that come up in the bids that he's seen. It has to be said that we're ahead of the Commission, in fact, with our events. The Commission are getting together the Horizon Europe. They change things, they amend things, they extend things, and in some cases information is still in short supply. Obviously they've suffered from the effects of the COVID pandemic, as everyone else has, but I give a health warning that some of the things we say today may change, and you must keep an eye on Horizon Europe and Accelerator to see if those changes are being made. For example, the first cutoff was scheduled for the 9th of June, but has now been extended to the 16th of June. So changes happen along the way. I'd also like to say that we very much enjoy meeting people in Turkey. I'm sitting here in the UK with this, this broadcast. We hope to bring physical events back soon, perhaps before the main summer break. It's not so good meeting you in cyberspace like this, but at least we're able to communicate and to get the message across. So apologies that we are online, and we hope to see you all in our events soon. So a quick look at the project. Many of you will have seen me before. My background's in manufacturing, but I've worked with the Commission for over 30 years, and I've also worked in Turkey for the last 10, and indeed long before that in the 1970s and 80s. So I'm familiar with Turkey and its companies, and have a lot of visits made to SMEs, about 150 SMEs. So I'm familiar with your problems and issues, and therefore how Horizon might help. The approach we have, just to cover the way these things are working now, we're timing 4 events before each of the cutoff dates. So as I said, the first cutoff date is the 16th of June. We've already had a webinar on the 6th of April. We then followed that with a project writing training event about making the short application. That's followed today by the full application, and then we shall have a project writing camp on the 21st of May, dealing with some of the final issues and questions, the financial tables and so on the 21st of May. As I said, the first cutoff is on the 16th of June, and we shall repeat that process before the other cutoff. So the next one is scheduled, unless it changes, for the 6th of October, and next year we expect June and October again to be cut off. So those are the events. They're all available on our project website. The material is there, along, as Merve said, with a lot of backup material from other events that we're holding and have held. Many of the Horizon 2020 issues, of course, relate to Horizon Europe, and I would strongly recommend that you take a look at them. Although we call Turkey in Horizon 2020, this is a contractual thing. It can't be changed, but we're very firmly there to help with Horizon Europe support. And we were scheduled to finish in the spring of next year, but we're hopeful that things may be extended to the autumn. So we are around, and even if we weren't, our website would be, and the material is there. This is our team. You'll see that we have the key experts there at the top. I feel in the minority. I have hair, but we shouldn't say these things. We boosted the team recently with a number of people to assist on public relations because of Horizon Europe. It's a much more prominent program, of course, at the beginning. And we're joined by our friend Serkan this morning, who has joined the team to help on the SMA instrument side of things. And of course, our friend Grigoris is also online this morning and covering quite a chunk of the presentations. You'll be familiar with Grigoris from earlier events. Alexander Bogowski is our team leader, and Odysseus Birolu is the guy who deals with legal and financial issues. We're all there to help. We're all contactable, as you can see, and we're delighted to hear from you. So Horizon Europe then, I think this is one of the logo pictures, but I think it sums it up very well. In the past, it's been about science, technology, innovation. It still is, but far more now in the applied fields. And you'll see on there, we have the elderly people represented, later life support. We have green issues. There's a lot of green around. You'll have seen the Green Deal in the last stages of Horizon 2020. It's about the environment. It's about assisting young people. There are lots and lots of issues there encompassed in Horizon Europe. And if you're submitting a bid under Horizon Europe, I strongly recommend that you look at the work program for the program because it covers the ground that the Commission are hoping to include in their events and in the proposals. So you can score extra points by showing how your project perhaps helps the environment by reducing pollution, saving energy. Perhaps it helps people in later life through making IT more accessible, for instance, or in early life, helping children to become more literate and so forth. There's a whole bunch of things that you can incorporate into your proposals that will give you perhaps those extra brownie points. And there are particular calls, which I'll cover in a second, on some of those issues. So the key objectives for our project for Turkey is, of course, to support participation in Horizon Europe, to strengthen the national capacity in science, technology and innovation, to help your researchers, and that's both public and private, to help them to integrate into the European research area, to build partnerships and relationships, and to provide a range of activities, this being one of them, to support businesses and particularly SMEs. People say to us, why participate in Horizon Europe or in framework programs? It's quite an arduous task to prepare proposals and to win through to funding. So why do it? There are wider issues than just cash. You have the current access to current and future technologies, to international partners in other European member states and beyond. Much bigger budgets, of course, than national budgets to share into. It gives you access to new markets, to industry and academia alike, and helps to see what standards and regulations perhaps are coming up that can be capitalized on. Every problem is an advantage in that sense. If you can gear up your products to meet with new standards, then it gives you a marketing edge. So the benefits really summed up, they're both economic and social benefits. And of course, it complements your use of the national funding to boost the investment that's already been made. Of course, the financial support is very important. And you'll see there that Horizon Europe at 95.5 billion is more than Horizon 2020. And we fully expect that to go over the 100 billion in the life of the project. So a huge sum, one of the biggest in the world. And that, of course, will run till 2027. It's spread over the next 6 years. The support available is mainly aimed at SMEs. And an SME, of course, is defined as 1 to 250 people. 250 is quite a big company, of course. And there's also this figure of up to 50 million turnover, which seems a crazy figure. But if you're running a steelworks, you may have a bigger turnover than that, but a staff of less than 250 because of automation. So it's there as a safety valve, if you like, to make sure that it goes to the smaller businesses. SMEs, people say, why help SMEs? I've heard it at national level in many countries, not in Turkey, but in other countries. It's because they're the lifeblood of any national economy. In Turkey, 92% of enterprises, 78% of employment, and over half of GDP comes from SMEs. So absolutely vital. And of course, any one of those SMEs could grow to become the Apple or the Microsoft of the future. And this is what the European Commission are looking for in their funding. So Accelerator, what's the purpose of Accelerator? It's bridging the funding gap from research development to commercialization, and particularly from development to commercialization. Research has shown that there's a lack of finance for young, innovative SMEs. Banks and financial institutions are notoriously risk averse to investing in these things. And there's always a nervousness of investing in technology because it often involves hardware, greater risk, and a longer term investment. So there can be a reluctance. There's an equity funding gap, therefore, between development and commercialization, they reckon, of around 70 billion euros. And there is this need for high-risk capital to reach the private investor stage. Accelerator is intended, in some way, it won't bridge the whole gap, but it's intended to help bridge that gap in finance and risk taking. I'm sure you've seen the valley of death diagram, which is often used for innovation, where public funds come in at the research level and separate parts of Horizon Europe cover the research element. And then, of course, on the right-hand side of the slide, in comes the private investment when things are looking less risky, the angel investors, and then on into venture capital and institutional investors. But in the middle, there's this gap, and this is traditionally what the European Commission have tried to cover. But with Horizon 2020 and now Horizon Europe, they've extended that coverage right through to the venture capital side of things. So they're trying to push companies further up that hill so that the private investors become more interested. There is available blended finance, and this can seem quite complicated. So here's the engineer's version of blended finance. If you look at the technology readiness levels, of course, they aim for 6 and above. If you look at those levels, the risk of a project becoming a commercial success gets greater as the TRL level is lower. So the risk is represented by this red ramp. It's very risky at 6 and it tapers off through 8 until at 9 there's much less risk. The financial people, however, are interested in investing as it goes up that scale to 9, much more interested in 9 than they are in 8 and not that interested at 6. So the Commission will give grants at 6 and tapering off into 7 and perhaps a little bit in 8, but unlikely. The grant is there to get over that risk and push it towards commercialization. The private sector, of course, not really interested at the lower level, but very interested when it gets up to a commercially viable product towards 9. And you'll see the gap in between there where there's perhaps still an element of risk between the grant and between the private sector being interested. And in fact, the European Commission have their own venture capital fund to bridge that particular gap. So you can see they've tried very hard to get investment in there, either as grants or venture capital, to make it of interest to private sector organizations. 3 key award criteria, which you'll recognize from Horizon 2020, the idea, the product, the service, process has to have excellence beyond state of the art. It has to have impact to meet the needs of European and global markets, and it has to have a good implementation, an excellent plan, team, strategic fit. And this is the basis of the rest of today's event, looking into those areas and seeing how to come off best in a bid to the Commission. Just finally, the project's here to help. You may have seen this slide before. We have lots of training events. We're about 3/4 of the way through our program, but there are still lots of events. They're on our website. They're there to be seen and to be attended. They're all free of charge. And we're covering things like focus groups on particular technology, the need for covering intellectual property rights and how they should be dealt with under Horizon Europe. We'll be dealing with access to risk finance, how you attract external finance, and this through webinars and project writing camps. Networking events, we've had major brokerage events, both physical events and online. Unfortunately, international study visits are, of course, postponed for the moment, but may resume as time goes on, depending on the pandemic situation. There will be awards for good innovation, and we shall have conferences and information days on Horizon Europe once things are set in concrete, as the Commission would say. My particular area of responsibility is on SME support. We're able to offer one-to-one consulting support on proposals which have not quite made it through to funding. We have project writing training. This is one of the events. We've had a pitching workshop to investors, but we shall soon have one on pitching to the Commission, which I hope will be well attended, we hope as a physical event. And we're also able to help on feasibility reports. This is an old term now, but again, this is helping with proposals which have received the Seal of Excellence. and investment readiness training we've already covered. To help us in our task, we have a number of tools. I've mentioned the website. We have a help desk. You can ask us anything you like and we'll try and answer. And we also have training guides, plus a huge amount of information sitting on the website from previous events. These are our contact details. We're easy to find, and the website will be given on several occasions through the presentation. So that's all from me. I'd like to hand over now to Grigoris to give us a recap on Horizon Europe.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much. You need to stop sharing your screen in order for me to share mine, if possible.
Yeah.
I think it might work now. Let me check.
Good. Technology is always nervous, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Grigoris Hadjikostas. Thank you all for your attention. I will not speak too much about myself. I think you already know me from the series of events. Very briefly, for the last 17, now 18, I think I need to renew this part of the presentation years, I've been a foot soldier in the European projects game. And I'm very happy that I'm here in Horizon Europe because I started since FP6, and I see that the programs are getting bigger and bigger. A few months ago, I would tell you that Horizon Europe is the biggest research and innovation investment program in the world. It's 95.5 billion euros. It seems that the situation has slightly changed with Biden administration announcing an even bigger research and innovation program for the United States. But I think that competition can only do better, and the more funds that are there for research and innovation, the better for the innovators globally. Very quickly, we are trying to briefly put you into the context of Horizon Europe again. So we start, what is the role of Horizon Europe? How does Horizon Europe get connected with the Sustainable Development Goals? It's about tackling climate change, and 35% of the budget is supposed to go there. It's about helping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And it's also about boosting the competitiveness and growth. More and better jobs, more income, more technology, more prosperity to the people of Europe and of the planet. And Europe seems to be a great place for innovation, but it's not always the case when we're talking about business research and development investment. You can see in this diagram that although Europe is very strong in academic production, when it comes to how much companies are investing in R&D, we're still lagging behind. And we're not lagging behind only by the US, but also from Eastern countries, such as Japan and South Korea. This means that we still have a lot of steps to take, a lot of gaps to lead. And Horizon Europe has a very ambitious target with respect to impact. If we would like to put it down to numbers, it's quite impressive to say that we're aiming with Horizon Europe to generate 11 euros for GDP for every single euro invested for the next 25 years, of course. This is quite an ambitious target that complements the other target we already mentioned, that 35% of the spending needs to contribute to climate objectives. But at the end of these targets, there is another expected impact, which is to create lots of jobs, 300,000 jobs by 2040, while 40% of those to be highly skilled jobs and highly paid jobs, of course. So these are important impacts that when we're discussing afterwards about your proposal and what kind of jargon, what kind of narrative to use, please keep in mind those important impacts. It's about prosperity, it's about tackling climate change, and it's about creating high quality jobs. These are the three elements that you need to take into account. Oops, sorry. So let's go a little bit on the structure. As you can see here, we can, apart from the specific targets like a specific program for defense or the Euratom, let's talk about the core of Horizon Europe, which is organized in three pillars. The first pillar, called Excellent Science, as the title assumes, it's science for the sake of science. The second pillar, which is about global challenges, we can call it science for the sake of society. Science to address major societal challenges and also to achieve industrial competitiveness. And then the third pillar, Innovative Europe, is science for the sake of business, let's call it. And this is where European Innovation Council programs exist. there is also another action that spans across the 3 pillars, and this is about widening participation and strengthening the European research area by bridging the gaps, by bringing countries with low performance in R&D to catch up with the highest performing countries. But this is a very interesting part for Turkey, and there will be specific topics in our program for that, but it's not possibly the topic of this discussion. Then from this one, we are moving a little bit to the 2 pillars that, in our opinion, and that's why you have this magnifying glass here, are important for startups and SMEs. One is about digital industry and space. The other one is about civil security for society, health, food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and environment, culture, creativity and inclusive societies, and climate, energy and mobility. These in Pillar 2, the clusters in Pillar 2 are specifically important for SMEs, because in all these projects, which are different from EIC Accelerator, they are mostly multi-partner projects, the SME aspect is very much highlighted. And then, of course, Pillar 3, which is very important. This is the European Innovation Council. There you find the EIC Accelerator, but also the EIC Pathfinder. A very interesting part of calls, similar to the InnoSub calls, is the ones in the European innovation ecosystem that connect with regional and national innovation actors. And last but not least is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, the so-called EIT. And you know that there are programs related to EIT Food, EIT Digital, etc. Last but not least, Horizon Europe aims to leverage private investment, aims to make a difference with this respect. So it aims to bring 200 billion euros, you can imagine how big this number is, to bring them into the game of European funding. This means that it aims to leverage the investments made by the taxpayers with market investment, with private sector money. Very quick reminder about the types of actions and their funding rates. So research and innovation actions, these are 100%. This is for lower TRLs. Innovation actions, which are for higher TRLs, this is 70% funding rate, except with possibilities where we have non-profit legal entities. Then coordination and support actions, 100%. Program co-fund, it's not really important for you, but innovation and market deployment is very much, because the EIC Accelerator fulfills this criteria. Then there are, of course, training and mobility actions and specifically designed actions for public sector procurement. This was, I hope, a brief refresher to get you into the context of Horizon Europe as a whole. And now I think, Philip, I will again give the floor back to you.
Okay, thank you, Grigoris. We seem to have zoomed in a little bit. Okay.
Philip, do you want me to open?
Yes, please. We seem to have technical problems. So, yeah. Sorry about that. Thank you, Grigoris. You can see that it's an absolutely enormous program, and there are lots of different avenues. And one of the difficulties can be in choosing the way through all of that to find what's relevant to you. Okay, so that's the broad picture. Let's now take a look at how SMEs can apply for the full accelerator support. Okay. Next slide, please. You've seen this picture from Grigoris. Next slide. Next slide. And you'll see that the European Innovation Council sits firmly under the funding pillars. Three main areas of support: Pathfinder, transition, and Accelerator. Today we're talking more about Accelerator. The other areas probably for slightly larger and more complex projects, but Accelerator is the one-to-one program aimed at SMEs. Next slide. Next slide. This is the Commission's description of Accelerator for innovative companies, from deep tech research to visionary innovation and scale up to successful commercialization. There must have been a lot of thought into that sentence because it does summarize the whole program there in one sentence. Just looking at those, next slide. Why should you apply? So I've highlighted in yellow there some of the keywords that really matter. The scale up, it has to be able to be produced in volume. The product or service that you're talking about has to have the ability to be scaled up to a commercial success. It has to make high impact. In other words, it has to be attractive to the market in order to be able to scale up. It's one of the reasons that you're able to sell in volume. And it has to have the potential to create new markets or disrupt existing ones. Ideally creating new markets, be that in different countries or different fields of technology, or disruptive. And this disruptive element is something that is threaded all the way through Horizon. It's coming into the market as a disruption. I give the example of the battery car. The electric car will disrupt the internal combustion engine, the diesel and petrol. But within that car, there are batteries. If you can produce a battery which takes half as long to charge, that's disrupting the battery market. And if you can produce a charger that can charge twice as quickly, that's disrupting the charger market. So disruption is at different levels in a product. So it could be a different process or a smaller piece of equipment or something that does more for the money. It's disrupting existing markets. The deep tech, another phrase that you'll see a lot, building on scientific discovery or technological breakthroughs. So they're trying to capture things which are new to the world and get them into the marketplace. And finally on there, the need for significant funding over a longer time frame. Another phrase that you'll see a lot, the patient capital. This is capital which is invested over time, and they mention 7 to 10 years even before a product might come to market. I actually think they're looking for a faster return than that, and certainly if you're using external investment, they will be looking for a faster return on their investment because they have other investments they can get a better and faster return on. So it's a competitive market. Next slide, please. So two types of calls, the open call. So this is really from our earlier project writing training event where we went into this in detail. An open call means that you can apply anytime for Accelerator in any field of technology and across different scientific, technical, sectoral and application fields. So it's a very open, as it's called, open call, and it's very much up to you to come forward with your ideas for that call. The second area, which is new to Accelerator, challenge-driven calls. I mentioned earlier the emphasis on other aspects of Commission support, the environment, the Green Deal, the assistance for the elderly, the healthcare and digital Europe and so forth. So these are actual challenges which will be calls issued at specific dates based on these priorities. And in 2021, there will be cutoffs for strategic digital and health technologies and some of the Green Deal innovations for economic recovery post-COVID. So it's worth keeping your eye open for those challenge-driven calls. Next, please. So what funding is available? Next. There's the grant only. I showed you a little diagram earlier where at TRL level 6 you may be just seeking a grant, but you have to be quite clear that it is the element of funding which covers the risk preventing a project from being more attractive to external investors. So this is the grant only part. The next. You can ask for a combination of finance, grant and venture capital, but to have the grant first, perhaps to prove a principle, to prove the commercial potential, to make it more attractive to external investment, which is lined up just in case or when you're able to prove that the risk has been overcome. The next. Grant and investment, which is the far more common one. So a grant then to cover the risky elements at Tiara levels 5 to 6, and then introducing investment as you go up the scale to Tiara level 9. 9 can only be for venture capital funding. Next. And the final one, the investment only. So this is at the very high end. Tiara level 9, where you've covered all the risks, you've proven the ideas, but you still can't attract the external investment. Next, please. How much? Next. The grant component, the maximum is 2.5 million, and substantial amount just for the grant component. The middle of that figure is the more usual. It's unusual to be so high, but it is available. They look for it being completed, the project being completed within 2 years. Smaller mid-caps, these are companies up to 500 are not eligible for grant, but they can apply for investments. Or if you're a slightly bigger company, you can still go in there looking for private sector investment. The next. The investment component is up to a very large figure, from $500,000 to a maximum of 15 million. Again, that figure is unusual to find. It's usually within the less than 10 million investment. It's usually as direct investment or quasi-equity. This is a strange term. If a company doesn't have shares which can be held by an investor, then they make an agreement to take a share of turnover, not profit, but income, to cover the cost of their investment. Again, a maximum of a quarter of investment in shares and so forth, but that still means you have an external investor involved in your business. What does that mean? You have someone asking about milestones, asking about deliverables, and checking that things are going well because they're safeguarding their investment. Next. So the last time we looked at the 5 different stages of the process. These are still valid. Next. And we covered stage 1. This is the short application last time. I suggest strongly, this was the 28th of April, that you have a look at that broadcast, because it gives you all the information on the short application. I think it's true to say that the Commission have put a lot more effort into the short application side of things in order to filter out the projects that are not likely to achieve funding. This is to both save time for them and of course to save time for applicants. So there's quite a stringent control on the first stage application in the hope that there are stronger then applications for the full investment, full proposal. The next. A quick reminder there that the short application had an online application form. It's artificially intelligence-based platform, as it's called, which is very new. You have to first of all go through a diagnostic to make sure that the program is relevant for you. And then there are a set of 15 or so questions you have to answer to tell or to set out what your project is about. And then when you submit it, you have to also submit a 10-slide pitch deck and a 3-minute video pitch. All of those we covered in the event on the 28th of April. Of April. Okay, next slide. So looking then at the full proposal, a key element of this is the need for a business plan. If anyone who's listened to previous events that I've been speaking at will know I'm a great proponent of the business strategy and the associated business plan, and the Commission have come down very firmly. If you don't have a business plan, you don't have a project. So it's very important to get this right. Next. The artificial intelligence-based platform, here are the details. It can be quite difficult to find at the moment. The website at the bottom there is still not fully working as a direct access, but you can access it through Europa, through the EC Funding and Tenders portal, which carries all of the funding and tenders that the Commission have available. If you go to Horizon Europe and Pillar 3, the European Innovation Council, go through the EIC Accelerator open calls. There are 3 levels of those. You're straight then into starting the submission process. Because it's online, you have to be, of course, registered with the Commission. It's a very easy thing to do. It's just a website, an email address to begin with. Website's also added later. You find it fairly easy to access through that way. Again, I recommend looking at the EIC work programme for 2021, which sets out all the detail of what's needed and how it will be evaluated and what happens next. So important to look at that. Again, the official version was published last month, so is now available. The next. So the artificial intelligence-based platform is quite a mouthful, isn't it? I wish it had a name. For the first stage, there's the discovery module, which helps you to identify all of the available sources of funding. So not just the Commission, but also local, regional, national grants. It obviously isn't fully stocked yet with all that information, but in time it will carry lots of information on where to look for alternative funding. The idea here is that perhaps not all projects are relevant to Commission funding, but may be relevant to other sources. There's a diagnostic module, which then I've just mentioned takes you through diagnosing your product, your project, and seeing whether it's viable. Next slide, please. That's all in the first stage. The second stage then moves on to the design. So you've gone through the first stage. The evaluators are quite happy with your submission. They've given you a go, and you're invited to make a second stage proposal. And at this stage, you're offered the support of mentors to help you to develop your proposal and your business plan. And there are also then additional questions in the course of applying to respond to the Commission's questions about the content of your project and the market it will be focusing on. And next slide. So the full proposal then, still prepared on the artificial intelligence-based platform. There will be questions. These questions are not yet published, but there'll be questions about the technology readiness level you're at. Please don't try and fool them into thinking it's at a lower level, because they will single out the higher level issues. And the ideal thing is, if you're at TRL level 6 and there's a risky element you're seeking to fund, it's good to put that into a module on its own so that the Commission can see they're funding that risk element, and then the rest of the project support you're looking for into the higher TRL levels where private sector finance may come in. So there were questions about the TRL level, the work packages, why you need EU support, why other people will not provide that support. And there are also questions around security of the product that you're suggesting, if there are security implications or health implications. It will include a methodology for the business plan, and there are automatic checks and feedback to guide you through the process. As I said, the coaches will help, but the Commission say quite firmly the proposal is your responsibility, not theirs. The information is held in confidence, of course, but you have the option for the EC to share the content with potential investors if you're looking to attract private sector finance. The next. So their expectations then in this full proposal, they want a full business plan. They want full information on the company's finances, the structure, the management, who owns it, how easy it is to transfer that ownership. because private sector investors will want to know that. Details of the team, and then the milestones, which are often set, of course, in the work packages, so that then they can check and manage the funding. So they can feed the funding in at the right levels if certain milestones are met. There will, of course, be responses around the main, the key evaluation areas of impact, excellence, and implementation, which will be covered later this morning. The situation with intellectual property, who owns it, whether you have patents and so forth. And of course, it goes without saying that they expect you to cross-check for accuracy, consistency, and so forth. Next. So you've got through the first stage. You'll have feedback from evaluators. You'll need to prepare your business strategy and plan if you haven't done already. And you have this remote coaching for 3 days. Then you can submit your full proposal. This has to be submitted within 12 months of their response to your first application. And as it takes a month to respond, that gives you up to 11 months to submit your proposal. So let's look at each of those then and see what they might be expecting. So feedback from evaluators. Next slide. Next slide. Still to be clarified, but they're likely to focus on these 3 areas: impact, excellence, and implementation. The next. So for impact, again, convincing evidence that there is a potential new or expanded market. The sector, the base, the scale, realistic view of the market, a strategic plan for commercializing, which comes into the business planning, that there is a European dimension, and there is evidence of freedom to operate. This means that the ownership or the patents can be easily transferred. If you have 2 owners with 50-50 share and one of them doesn't want to say sell or to go into an agreement, and the other one does, it's stalemate. So there has to be this evidence of freedom to operate. Next. On the excellence, we mentioned earlier, they're looking for high risk, high potential ideas. So it has to be ideally different to anything else on the market, and you have to prove it. None of this to the best of our knowledge or a search of the web has shown. You have to prove that it is new to market. Of course, highly innovative, disruptive, again, comes in beyond what's available. And to do that, you have to show you have a good understanding of the risks associated with it. Not only do you have to convince the Commission that the evaluators that there is a market, but that you understand the market and you understand the risks associated with entering in that market. I've often seen companies who are moving into a market which isn't their traditional market, a completely new product in a completely new sector. And I must say the chances of that happening are very slim because they simply don't know the market they're going into. I also get companies saying, we're going to market to Europe. Europe is 50 countries. There are 27 member states, all of them with different language, different regulations, different competition and stages of development. So you have to be far more specific and evidence the fact that you have looked at those markets and investigated them. And finally, of course, they have to be convinced that the outcome and your criteria for success will show a commercial result. Next. Finally, implementation of those 3, showing that you can't find the funding anywhere else. Of course, the Commission have limited funds, even though they're enormous, and they want to apply it where it can do the most effect. So if you can find alternative funding, or if you can find funding that would be available, if you could get over the element of risk I mentioned earlier, then that is all to the good. And I mentioned that the diagnostic will help you to find alternative funds as well. They're looking, of course, at the technical and business experience of the team. Often there's an unbalance to be expected if you have an R&D project which is going towards a commercial product, there will be an imbalance of technical people compared to the commercial and business side of things, but you have to make up that gap. And I know from personal experience, engineers trying to market, not as good as marketing people trying to market engineering. So you have to show a good balance and be convincing. If you're missing those resources, you can build the need for them into your proposal and show that you will recruit if you're successful. As well as human, there's also physical resources, equipment, partnerships, stakeholders, subcontractors. The Commission are very nervous of funding being watered down, shall we say, into other stakeholders and subcontractors, so you have to be very careful how you define that. Finally, they're looking for a realistic and achievable time frame and work packages that support this with milestones against ambitions and, of course, with budgets. Next slide, please. So the next thing then, business strategy and plan. Next. You'll be assisted on this by the mentors. But in our experience, many companies lack a strategic view, a look forward. They're not fully aware of their potential. And they're too easily satisfied with doing more of the same. Now, it has to be said, Turkey is a big national market, consumer market, and many companies have grown quite substantially, simply supplying nationally without the need for export. So it's not a set thing that you have to export. But of course, if you're expecting money from Europe, then Europe is expecting to see a benefit in terms of profits or jobs to their economies. So there's often little awareness of what the competition are doing and often short-sighted on customer needs. We quite often see a research team who've developed an idea but not really looked at the need in detail. And of course, it becomes your baby and you say, oh, it must be the best, or we think it's the best, and you can hype up your own product, but that's not good when it gets to external scrutiny, who can ask some very difficult questions. So there's often little investment in marketing, product development, or actual research and development. There's a mistake made with some of these terms. Research and development are often lumped together, two very different things. Research is very different from development. We get mergers and acquisitions, again, two different things. It's the development side, really, that the Commission are trying to help finish off so that something can be commercialized. Next slide, please. I know from running a research business that researchers love to research, and it's very difficult to get them to complete that research and finally say, okay, it's ready for market. So the business strategy, I always recommend a rolling 5-year strategy. So each year you add another year, so you never achieve your 5-year. But of course, with hindsight, you can look back and see whether you did achieve your 5-year goals. So each year another year is added. And the idea there is to just gather the views of key people in the business and see what direction you want to go in. So there's discussion and decisions on the way forward and some idea of setting performance indicators and associated budgets with that strategy. It is, of course, monitored, and there are consensual changes where necessary. Circumstances change, COVID being the example over the last 2 years. But all of this helps you then to prepare a more detailed business plan each year for the 12 months ahead. I used to go through this process in September, and we'd amend the strategy and then develop a business plan by December for the following year. Often, of course, it's tied to the financial year of that business. So some key questions you see on the left there. How do we see the business developing? Why does the business exist? What do we want to do with that business? Some very key questions. And you'll find among senior people, some will say, we're very happy at the size we are, we're doing very well, we have good income. Others will say, no, we want to grow to be one of the biggest in the world, for instance. Others will say, we're a research and development company, we're not a manufacturer, so we ought to develop the idea and then sell it to a manufacturer so that we can invest more in R&D and the things that we like doing. So some key questions there around strategy. And if you don't deal with those before your proposal, then the judges in the commission will be asking, what is your strategy? Where do you see your business in 5 years? What's your plan? And rather than sitting there looking dazed, you need to have those answers. Next slide, please. So it may seem theoretical, all of that, but a simple question: would you go on a journey without knowing when you were going, where you were starting from, your destination, or how you're going to get there? Next slide, please. Why run a business this way? And so many businesses are run that way. It's day-to-day firefighting, looking for cash, not knowing where the next cash is coming from. It's a very stressful way to run a business. Now, you can't predict the future, but you can certainly set out a few directional things that will help you to do that. And believe me, it can be a tough thing to go through a strategy and business plan, but you're really pleased when you've done it, because you're all looking at the same direction and you have a way of measuring your progress and amending that progress if necessary. Next slide, please. So why do we need them? It's not just to satisfy Accelerator, it's so that you drive the business and the business doesn't drive you. It helps with your own peace of mind. It helps, of course, with investors and bankers and the commission judges. And it helps to provide focus for key people in the business. If there's any dissent, it comes out at your strategy meeting rather than having people who may be resentful during their working time. Next, please. So it's not just a paper exercise. You really got to believe in it. You've got to look in depth at the business. It should be achievable. It should be widely discussed. And you should regularly revisit. As I said, a 5-year rolling plan with a 1-year business plan is a good thing to have. Next, please. So 3 questions that it answers. First, where are you now? What's your starting point? How's your business developed so far? What's it achieved? What's been the rate of growth? The next, not surprisingly, is where are you going? What's your vision for your business from your strategy? What goals have you set to achieve this vision? And the third one, how will you get there? Of course, this is where the business plan comes in. What strategy you have to achieve and what's the time for it all to happen? Now, these are all questions that judges may ask. How have you developed so far? Where do you see your business in 5 years? How are you going to get there? Fairly standard stuff. Next slide, please. Now, this looks complicated. It isn't. You start with your mission statement. All of this is in the strategy, through the company background, through the products you are producing or intend to produce, and then you're into your marketing plan, looking at the competition, looking at SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, how it affects your operations, how you finance it, the time frame for doing that, and then finally, the executive summary. A lot of people think they start with the executive summary, not the case. Of course, it's a summary of your business plan. Needn't be a huge document, but as long as you cover those areas, it's important to do so. Next slide, please. Huge amount of help out there, something like 23 million references on Google for business planning tools. And I think it's over 100,000 books available on Amazon. So no excuse for not getting into it if you're not already. Next slide, please. All of you will have heard of SMART goals. The business plan should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time related. I think we're all familiar with that one. But it's not just a buzzword. It actually does have relevance to the business. Next, please. So how does it all fit in? It's the business plan, the strategy is at every stage. It's in your introduction. Where are you now? Where are you going? It's in the excellence part, your product versus the competition in the marketplace. It's in the impact, again, looking at markets and customers, how you acquire customers, the implementation, how the project or product fits with the rest of the business and the team, and the supporting content, you know, the team composition, the physical resources needed, the finance, and of course it's in your pitch deck. Next slide, please. So webinar 3 in the series of 9 webinars we've held, soon to be 11, covered business planning in more detail. So it's available on our website, and I strongly recommend, if you've not done your strategy review and your business plan, you do it as a first stage, because it has a bearing on even whether you apply for Accelerator as opposed to just the second stage. Next slide, please. So finally, the 3 free days of remote coaching. Next slide. Often confusion between what's a consultant, what's a coach. A consultant identifies problems that you've brought them in to look at and provides alternative solutions. So it's often a defined exercise over a set period, for example, 5 days over 4 weeks, or it may be just coming in for 5 days to look at the problem and reporting back. It's a set piece of work. Coaching, however, is working alongside the senior people in a business to look at the goals, understand their problems and challenges, and helping them to identify their own solutions. So they're working with you as a football coach works with a team, working with the team to look at the issues and see what they think are the solutions and what the possibility is of resolving them or settling with them and living alongside them. So typically they're shorter sessions over a longer period. For example, you may have 6 half-day sessions over 3 months. And of course this for the Commission is delivered online because of current issues. Next slide, please. So you get 3 free days of remote coaching. And the coaches are, we're told, independent business experts with entrepreneurial and fundraising backgrounds. And you can choose from a large pool of people managed by the EIC Business Acceleration Services. This has been around for some time, so there are a lot of experienced coaches in there. Again, quite firmly, you remain responsible for your proposal. They're not going to do it for you. And you have to believe in what's said in there. And it's only available on your first application. So if unfortunately you didn't succeed and had a second application, there wouldn't be any more coaching available. Next slide, please. So the evaluation of the second stage proposal takes 5 to 6 weeks. It's looked at by 3 remote experts. Again, they're expert evaluators in the field of technology and markets. And they're selected on the basis of the keywords that you have provided in the proposal. So absolutely vital that you set the keywords to fit with your product and your need. Don't make it too technical. Think about the markets too, so that you get a balance of evaluators. Remember that not all will be English speaking, so try and keep the language to an understandable level. This is often a problem with technical proposals. It's too technical and it needs too focused an expert to look at it. They'll of course look at the innovative nature of the project, the disruptive potential, its likely impact and so forth. And they will each give a go or no go to the proposals. If they all give a go, then you're invited to the panel meeting. But if one or more give a no go, you can be you have the option of resubmitting the proposal just once. But if that's not successful, you're prevented from resubmitting for 12 months, and you have to go back to the first stage application. So you can see it's very important to get it right first time. Next slide, please. If it is rejected the first time, but the jury see that it can be, it has good potential with a few tweaks, then you can resubmit it once to one of the next 2 interview panels. If it's rejected because the criteria are not met, again, you can resubmit it once, but it will need reworking to meet those criteria. And the feedback from the evaluator should show you where they have their concerns. Again, if it meets the excellence and impact, but still doesn't justify EC funding, then a seal of excellence can be awarded. This can be very useful if you're looking for external funding. And you can also, of course, resubmit once to the second stage, as with the rejected criteria not met. If it's rejected the second time, as I've just said, unfortunately, you cannot resubmit for 12 months. And the submission is based on your PIC code, the actual code for the company. So I'm afraid you have to go back to square one. Next slide, please. There are two other types of application which are not currently available, but I mentioned just in passing. The fast track scheme will be available for projects where an agency, a respected agency, such as the EIC Executive Agency, Knowledge and Innovation Committees, Eureka Secretariat, and so on, consider a proposal is worth considering for funding. And it can go into the second stage application without going through the first. However, I would strongly suggest if that was the case, it's still worth going through the first stage because that's a good foundation. And then there's the plug-in scheme, which again is just in the thinking stage at the moment. The Commission intend to launch an initiative in 2022, and this will be a situation where projects are assessed at national level and they're put forward to enter the accelerator application process at stage 2. Again, next year is a long way off, and I'm not sure whether Turkey will be participating in that particular program, but it may be an option next year. Next slide, please. Again, there's our details. It's all over the place. I won't repeat it. Next slide, please. And if you do have any questions, please put them online and we'll try and deal with them in the course of the event. We do have a Q&A session towards the end of this morning's event. And if we can't deal with all the questions we deal with and the additional ones will be available on our website. So thank you for listening. And I'd now like to hand over to Grigoris to take us through a bit more of the content. Over to you, Grigoris.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much indeed. It will only be a second.
That's what I said.
It's always tricky when you're trying to do it online. I understand. It's more difficult actually to fill in the gaps. I think physical events are much better for this purpose.
Yeah.
So we have it here, and now I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. So, what is the first assumption, as Philip mentioned before? The first assumption in this process is that the template will remain same or at least similar as Horizon 2020. There might be a few changes indeed. However, we have two good reasons to believe that the changes will not be dramatic and the key points will be the same. The first is the information we have so far by the European Commission, which indicates that indeed there are not going to be dramatic changes. And this was even explicitly mentioned by the previous Commissioner Moedas when he was describing the philosophy of Horizon Europe as an evolution, but not a revolution, meaning that the same things with respect to priorities will more or less remain the same. The second thing is that the template for the full proposal of EIC Accelerator was one that can be considered as a well-thought one. It was one that was covering common sense. It was one that was covering the main elements and the main criteria that not only reviewers of a European project, but also investors would look in a company. Therefore, we have very good reasons to believe that the basics will remain the same. And these are the basics that I will guide you through this process today. Hopefully, the changes are not going to be very big. So, first of all, with respect to the template, as Philip said, we have three basic sections: excellence, impact, and implementation. Excellence, more or less, is what you are doing, what we want to achieve. The impact is why we're doing it, what we are expecting to get out of that. And the implementation is more or less how we're going to implement it, how we're going to do it. And then, of course, there is space for annexes, there is space for additional documents, and also the financial information and the pitch deck. Disclaimer, in this presentation, we're not going to go deeply into financials. This will be the topic of another presentation. Today, we will explain, of course, what is there, what is expected there, but we are mostly going to guide you through the main ideas regarding the quality of the presentation. Another very important thing is the introduction. It's very important to be able, either in one sentence, as we were discussing before, or in 200 words, to be able to explain what is your company doing. This is extremely tricky and extremely difficult, particularly when you need to do it in a way that does not include jargon and technical language. So it's easy to say that you are applying AI, NLP, and ML, machine learning, in order to solve problems related on classification or sorting algorithms. That doesn't mean anything to the reader. For me, it would be easy to tell you that I'm working as a short-term, non-key senior expert in a project called Turkey in Horizon 2020. But if I told you that my job is to help Turkey's researchers and innovators to get money from Europe, you would possibly understand my job much better. Therefore, it's important possibly to try to use the right simplified jargon. As I say to people, that how would we explain it to our mother? How would we explain it to a person who is not an expert in the domain? Then, another important thing that we will look directly is about the idea and the solution, to explain the innovation in details. What are the objectives? What are the challenges and the problems we are trying to solve by bringing this innovation to the market? Sometimes we say that we begin by first selling the problem and not the product, by selling how important is the problem we are trying to solve, how many people it really affects, or how much cost it really includes, or how many lives of people really influences. And then when we are describing our innovation, it's good to describe the innovation in detail. In this slide, what I would try to do is, apart from telling you that this was from a previous, it's a robotic structure that aims to detect insects and spray selectively. But the main reason that I gave you this is that it's very, very important to visualize what you are trying to do. There is a common phrase that one picture equals 1,000 words. I would say it's even sometimes, in our case, one picture equals 1,000 pages, because we are trying to explain very quickly, but to the point, what exactly our innovation is consisted of, technically speaking. Then, when we're discussing objectives, again, it's very important to have a generic objective and to have specific objectives. And objectives need, most of the times, to be tied with key performance indicators to explain not only what we're trying to do, but how can we measure our success with respect to our objectives of what we're trying to do. Remember what Philip mentioned before for SMART objectives. M stands for measurable. And this is something that we see very often being neglected. And this is something that the reviewers, particularly since they are coming from the world of investments, of the world of business, are expecting to see. Then, when it comes to problems, it's also super important to highlight how many people's problems really affect. It's very important to highlight it using some credible sources, some credible research. It's not only enough to say there is a huge market, or everybody eats, or everybody wants to get a cure from XY disease. It's very important to demonstrate, to compare it with other problems, and to demonstrate how important it is. In the case that we were trying to sell to the Commission a robot for spraying, we identified from the Eurobarometer surveys that the residues of pesticides in fruit, vegetable, and cereals are the most important concern of European consumers when it comes to food. And this was the way to highlight how important the problem we're trying to solve is. Then, innovativeness. How are we better than the others? How are we better than existing alternatives? And what is the right, if the timing is right for our innovation? You know from Victor Hugo that all the forces in the world are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. But has this idea really come? First of all, how do we compare existing alternatives? One way to do it is, on one hand, to identify some functions, some properties, some specific characteristics of the product that we have good evidence that customers care about. In that case, it can be the speed, the range, the cost, the user level, the price. These are very important aspects. And then it's very important to identify potential competitors. Competitors in the broader sense. Competitors doesn't necessarily mean that people who are selling a device similar to ours or a software similar to ours. It means companies that are solving the problem we are trying to solve with any kind of way. And these are our competitors. And then we need to explain the difference that we are able to produce with respect to these competitors. Then we go to the timing. There is the so-called innovation hype cycles. So normally, when something very promising pops out in the market, there are a lot of people, nothing exists or is it proven, but it creates some interest. In the beginning, the enthusiasts, the geeks, the people who want to do it, to learn more about that. Then while this traction picks up, we are entering the period of peak of inflated expectations, as we call it. Here you have some cases that people succeeded in this, or you have sometimes cases where people really made lots of money through this, and so on. And then you go from inflated expectations always to disillusionment. Always then you understand that, unfortunately, this is not able to solve all our problems. And then from this, you go to the slope of enlightenment. Slope of enlightenment is the place when you realize that, indeed, actually, there are lots of problems that can be solved. And then after you reach this thing, you can go to the so-called plateau of productivity, meaning that now the technology can be accepted. We know what it can do. We know what it cannot do, and we can find our way there. Look how this thing looks like, and I will use my favorite example about that, which is the blockchain. A couple of years ago, everybody was talking about the blockchain. Blockchain was about to solve all the problems in the planet, to give answers to all the questions in the world. And then we listened that from innovation trigger, from learning the first about Bitcoin and about how many people became rich because they were clever to invest in a few Bitcoins in the very beginning. We went to the peak of inflated expectations. And now I think we are in the case of disillusionment, because now we are understanding that there are so many problems that blockchain cannot solve. There are so many technical limitations that blockchain poses. And from now on, it can become a good, profitable business. Because people have lost the trust, people have lost, they saw that not everything can be solved. And now we can see where it can really work without illusions that it can be panacea for everything. Obviously, when you are addressing this call, the EIC Accelerator, it's always helpful that your project is either in the innovation trigger or in the peak of inflated expectations. But obviously, you need to be able to demonstrate that you are committed enough and focused enough to take your idea from here to the plateau of productivity, from here to the case where it becomes an accepted technology and you become a trusted vendor of this. This is very important, particularly when one considers the next steps of the project. You need to be able, we have now very short cycles in technology, meaning that one technology that was hot 2 years ago, today we might be in the disillusionment phase, and that's why I use this example. This means very often that you need to be able to steer through that, because the project you are submitting now most likely would be finishing and your product would be launched massively in the market in 2 years or 3 years from now. Then we already seen the technology readiness levels. Obviously, we're moving. We are in EIC Accelerator. We need to move in the neighborhood from 6 to 9. We need to explain where are we standing now, what activities we have done, and what results we have achieved so far, and what are the next steps planned to take this innovation to the market. So the current stage of development has to do with the status. The status means what we have achieved so far. What are the services we are able to offer? What are the functionalities we are offering together with the services? Here, the company that is doing that explains which crops it supports, which diseases it supports, which types of pests it can monitor, but it also explains the pilot deployment that it has achieved, which is very important because keep in mind, we're talking TRL 6+. It means that your idea has been tested in an operational environment. And of course, even more important, what kind of customers have you already onboarded, or what are the plans for you to onboard customers? So the idea here is to give a snapshot of where you are standing now, and this snapshot needs to fulfill the requirements of the call with respect to maturity, with respect to ability to address customers. Then we go to the activities and the results, but also to the next steps. And it's very good here to combine them in the historical perspective. You can see two examples now. One is that we are explaining how we move from a small prototype into a commercial deployment, and we're explaining the technology readiness level. Sometimes we need also to separate between different components of our innovation, and we put the time scale. We put the time perspective. Also, it's very important to explain what are the next steps. What do you need to do? What do you need to do in terms of human resources? We will discuss it later. And what you need to do in order to expand functionalities. These are important things, but also you might have other investment plans like finalization or new algorithms. So it's good to demonstrate what are the next steps accurately and fitting the overall ambition for global markets. Then, when it comes to feasibility, there are lots of ways to bring together technological, practical, and economic feasibility. I tend to look at one book, one of the many that exist in the market, one of the many that exist in this domain. It's called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank. And this is the book that most of the time helps people understand how we are going from customer discovery to building a company, and how this connects the product development process with the customer development process. And this is, in my opinion, what proves feasibility, because you are proving the feasibility from the economic point of view, from the technological point of view, and from the practical point of view. Unfortunately, you cannot distinguish these two, because there is a very big interplay among them. So, how we are building our product and how we better understand our customers, have a highly dialectic relationship between them. And it's good to take that into account when you are explaining the feasibility of your solution. Then, risk. I think that the biggest mistake one can make while submitting a proposal in EIC Accelerator is to claim that there are no risks. That our idea has absolutely no risk. Entrepreneurship is about risk. It is about jumping off a cliff and building the parachute on the way down. One thing I would like to highlight is that we need to distinguish between the business risks, and European Commission is looking for proposals with business risk, because we're looking for high risk, high potential companies, versus the project risk that have to do with implementation. For the second case, we're going to talk about them at the end when we're talking about implementation. But here at this part, normally we would like to demonstrate the business risks and to show that we understand them and to show that we are ready to tackle them in market terms. So let us, for the section 1, let us try a little bit to refresh our memories with respect to criteria. We're talking about high risk and high potential innovation ideas that would offer better and significantly different solutions to the existing ones. By definition, high degree of novelty comes together with a high chance of success, but also for failure. We're looking that the current stage of development is at least at TRL 6 when it comes to technology readiness levels, but something analogous to the business readiness levels and the society readiness level. And what are the steps to take this one to the market? Clearly, we have to go beyond the current state of the art and to demonstrate that in comparison to our competitors, to understand risks and opportunities, and to document the technological, practical, and economic feasibility. The feasibility thing theoretically will be also assessed during the interview. All of these topics will be assessed during the interviews, actually. And also to make sure that the objectives are ambitious enough and consistent with the expected impact and resulting in some significant growth. We're looking for ambitious proposals in EIC Accelerator, not business as usual. Of course, all this needs to be coherent and plausible with the rest of the proposal. Then we go to the section 2, which is about impact. And here, the first thing we need to look at is market. Possibly those of you who attended the previous webinar will remember what I said about the market. It's not only enough to be in a big market. Sometimes it's much more interesting to be in a growing market. But in this part, we need to assess the market, including the conditions and the growth rate, to look a little bit on our potential customers, to convince the reviewers that we know our customers, to identify some unique selling points, and we can discuss together if unique means one or unique can be more than one, and of course to highlight our differentiators, to highlight what makes us different. With respect to the market assessment, the analytical framework is clear. It's about total available market, serviceable addressable market, and serviceable obtainable market. So we are moving from the big pictures, let's say from the total agricultural robotics market, gradually towards the market which is close to our solution, the total market for spraying robots, down to our realistic goal to really sell robots to farmers in Southeastern Europe or in Middle East or whatever our target market is. So we're explaining what is the total demand for the project, what we can achieve based on our current business model, and what are the practical limitations that we might face, and what is really the market that we hope to capture at the end. Then, with respect to potential customers, we're talking about market size and market segmentation. With market size, the situation goes like this. It's not only enough to segment the market in terms of geographical places. It's also important to find some other characteristics that allow us to understand better the market. Would it be based on the size of the customer? Would it be based on the activity of the customer? All these segmentations serve a number of purposes. The very obvious one is that we convince our reviewers that we know our market, and that's clearly very important. Equally important, though, is the following one. We need to be able to demonstrate that we are flexible and we can adjust our policies. We can adjust our pricing policy, our service policy, based on the customer needs, based on the different segmentation of the customer. And this is also something important to be taken into account. And then we go to the unique selling point or points. I learned from Philip very well that a unique selling point cannot be too many of them. It has to be one. But nevertheless, there are cases where we can highlight functionalities that allow us to stand out from our competitors. Again, here I'm using the example of the possibility of being able to demonstrate visually what you can do better and bigger than your competitors. Then, from this one, we go to the commercialization strategy. Okay, we know the market, we understand it very well, we understand where we're better than the competitors, but that's not certainly enough. We have to sell and make money out of it now. So here, we need to identify the strategy for commercialization, the regulatory approvals and compliance needed, the time to market deployment, and the revenue model. Commercialization strategy, again, it is about deploying our activities over time, understanding, combining our pricing strategy, our geographical scope of development, and also how we are going to move from one way to another from one point to another in terms of capturing markets. You can see here that you can, for example, identify various phases, starting from research and development, moving to pre-commercial development, all the way down to commercial development. And this thing can also need to be somehow connected with our technology readiness levels, but also with our pricing policy and so on and so forth. Then, when it comes to revenue models, the revenue models is a very clear way to describe how we're going to make money. What is the framework for generating revenues? Where the revenues come from? What value do we offer? What is the price of the value and who pays this value? There are many complicated or less complicated revenue models. One thing I can say for sure is the following. Obviously, if you are into some digital advertisement based on AI and machine learning solution, your revenue model is going to be complicated. But there is nothing wrong in having a very simple revenue model. I'm going to sell this product, it's going to cost that much, customers are expected to pay that much, and that's the money I'm going to make. This is perfectly fine. Don't worry about that. Don't overcomplicate your revenue model in order to impress evaluators. Sometimes, I think that Serkan would also agree with me, sometimes people are impressed by the simplicity of the business models, by how easy they are to understand, because this way, the beautiful business is based on simple ideas. So don't be afraid. Of course, if your revenue model is complicated, you have to explain it. But if your revenue model is simple, don't artificially complicate it. That's a piece of advice I could offer. Then, when it comes to external strategic partners, as you can see here, it's very important to explain what key partners are needed to commercialize innovation, what are the roles and the competencies that they have, and what are the ways to commit them and incentivize them. Here, this company explains what are their own applications. They're working with Microsoft, they're working with Origin Trail, and they're trying to explain how they're basing their solutions into other technologies. One very important thing now is how do you convince that you indeed have those strategic partners? The answer is letters of intent. But the letters of intent need to be custom. It's sometimes we see in proposals that someone makes a template for letters of intent and then he calls 10 of his friends, which have companies that are relevant or not so relevant with the topic, and gets 10 identical letters. This barely works with the reviewers these days. The best way, if you want your letters of intent to make sense, it's a good idea to make them custom. Ask your partners to explain their interest in the letter. Ask, first of all, to be signed by some decision maker and put them all in the annex. That's a very good sign of your ability to attract traction, of your ability to build partnerships that you are going to certainly need on your way to commercial success. And of course, intellectual property, the freedom to operate. What is your, how the IP is related to your innovation? What are your key assumptions? What IP are you planning to protect? The freedom to operate is a very, very important aspect. Now we're looking of ways to see how to optimize this so that companies know upfront that they have the possibility for the freedom to operate globally. But for sure, what you need to do is to do some very, very serious research of what patents exist already in the topic that you are addressing, and how to make sure that you're not stepping on the toes of those patents when you are trying to put your application forward. And then comes the scale-up potential. Scale-up, meaning how do we move from a startup to an established company? We have the startup, the scale-up, and the scaler. Scaler is like the challenge in the beginning in the startup is how can we find a repeatable and scalable business model? We will discuss what scalable means later on. Then in the scale-up is how can we achieve exponential growth and market development through strategic collaborations and with established corporates. And the scaler is how can we challenge, how can we sustain the market leadership and growth and defend our territory from the competitors? Now, how we move from the one to the other and how do we avoid the chasm? This is exactly what the EIC Accelerator aims at, because it's not about early startups for seed funding. It's about companies that can already prove some traction, but now they need to establish a repeatable and scalable business model. So, the scale-up potential. Scale-up is a very simple term to explain a little bit how you make more money the more you grow. It's how to explain that the more you grow, the bigger your profits. And this scale-up potential can be sometimes demonstrated through new markets. This scale-up potential can be sometimes demonstrated through growth in markets with bigger potential to generate incomes than the one we are currently operating. Also, the scale-up potential needs to be depicted properly on the growth of the company. The growth of the company in terms of market share, in terms of customer base, in terms of business portfolio, in terms of number of employees, and so on and so forth. It's also important if you can, and I'm sure it needs to be done in the course of this process, to give very ambitious targets with respect to your turnover and your profit. And then key performance indicators related to the success criteria for the innovation. Here it's important also to find the dates where key performance indicators are going to be materialized. One good such way is the break-even point. Possibly those of you who attended the previous seminar remember the break-even point. We will refresh your memory in the last seminar because we will talk more about the financials. But nevertheless, in plain terms, the break-even point is the point where you stop losing money. So the business KPIs, the business performance indicators, need to be addressed in particular timing. So you can say, my target value after I reach my break-even point would be this and this and this. And also, we are living in the times of the Green Deal. We are living in the times of no one left behind. So it's very important to highlight the broader impact. Nowadays, companies and startups need to focus on an impact. So the societal, economic, environmental, climate, what will be the impact, the positive, hopefully, after your innovation is successfully commercialized? It's good to be aware what are the Commission initiatives that are trying to address this impact and try to link your solution with them, because you are linking also your chances for commercial success with them as well, with the same time. To sum up the criteria for the second stage, you need to convince the reviewers about substantial demand. You need to demonstrate that you will be in a big but also growing market. You need to convince them that you have, you know your customers and you know their needs and you know how to segment your market, and again to compare with what is currently available in terms of services. Important thing: realistic and relevant analysis of the market conditions and the growth rate. Realistic and relevant analysis of the position of the competitors. Convincing scale-up potential. This is something that for sure they're going to be an important decision-making criterion during the interviews as well. Alignment of the proposal with the overall strategy of SME. It cannot be that your proposal is something and your company works in another direction. That's something that they will check, that your company and the product that you are proposing through the EIC Accelerator proposal are more or less well aligned, and also to see that you have a realistic and relevant strategic plan for commercialization. The commercial aspect strategy is very important. Very often we see excellent proposals from Turkey in the technical terms, coming from super bright people from the lab, but missing this element, which is a pity, because this is something that requires extra attention, and once achieved, it can really make the difference. Of course, European and global dimension. It's great that you are addressing the Turkish market, but it's not enough. The EIC Accelerator is about companies with ambition to go beyond their own borders. It's a competitive advantage, though, that you can start from already a big domestic market. And of course, evidence that you have done your homework with respect to IPR, you know that you have the freedom to operate, you know which patents are on your way and how you can overcome them with your differentiators at the technology level. Also, regulatory and standard requirements also are understood. You need to demonstrate that you can understand. And now we're going to the third part, implementation. And the first thing to consider when we're talking about implementation is the team. Who is it for? What are the roles? What are the achievements and the expertise that they have done before? What is the role of the company owner? How much of the time of the owner do you believe that should be addressed in an SME? My answer is 110%, because this is, if you are not betting your life and your professional career in a company, why would you like taxpayers to put their money and investors to put their money in the same company? Then, what are the shareholding and stock options of the team members? What are the strengths and weaknesses? And so on. Let us look at them one by one. Here is about the role of commitment. Okay, let's avoid the overstated and sometimes fancy jobs like growth ninja or whatever else goes in Silicon Valley those days. But the typical roles in a company like the CEO, the CTO, sometimes Chief Operations Officer or Chief Market Officer needs to be covered. If they are missing at one point, it's good to highlight what is missing. And then it's very important to demonstrate the achievements and previous expertise. If you look at the CV here, you see Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz is one of the most famous investors worldwide in the United States. And if you look how he started as a marketing position, then he moved towards management positions. Then from management positions, he moved towards co-founder and CEO. And then from CEO, he became an investor. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to have a CV of Ben Horowitz to be successful in the EIC Accelerator. But it's good to demonstrate that all the people that are involved in your team somehow have done something previous that is remarkable in terms of achievement, but it's also related somehow to the innovation we are trying to build now. And then the stock options. We all know how important it is to incentivize employees, align their interest with the shareholders, and compete against the huge companies that are going to be your main competitor in attracting talent. This is why it's very important to demonstrate all from the beginning that you have a well-thought stock options plan in mind. And here in this table, and this will be available for you afterwards, you can see some good ideas with respect of what is expected from investors when it comes to a typical pre-financing equity stock options or structure. Then, it's very important to make a credible and realistic assessment with what you are standing now, because keep in mind, this project will aim to fulfill your own needs. So, it's very important to explain your strengths, but it's also very important to not to hide below the carpet your weaknesses, but to highlight them and somehow connect them with your plans. So if you are lacking sales marketing skills, or if you are lacking a person that can help your development, your business development outside of Turkey, it's important to explain that among your plans is this one as well. And then we move from that to incentives. We move from that to how you are going to incentivize your personnel. And the obvious way is money, financial incentives, what salaries, stock options, and others. However, you will find out that particularly for the younger generation, this is not enough. And I'm not talking only about the perks that companies, and particularly technology companies, like to give now, like flexible working hours, ability to travel all over the world once the pandemic goes better, company cars or team building activities, but also the belief that they are working for a purpose. This is also a very important incentive for people to work in your company. And it's important to highlight it directly. Then once we have discussed about the team, about who is going to implement, then we're talking about the financial needs. As I told you, I will not go very deep into detail today about the topic, because we are expecting to have these financial needs in the next webinar. More or less, you're going to need the typical financial statement. So if you're preparing a proposal and you're already working on it, my strong encouragement is to give this slide to your accountant with respect to financial statements, to financial data relating your cash and debt, to other information about your company, and start collecting your information. You're going to need it for sure. Then remember what we were talking about, project risks versus the business risks. There are some projects, there are some risks which are related to the implementation of the project, like if we will be able to find people to test the validation, if we're going to be able to identify the right people to work in the project, and so on and so forth. Here you need to explain also in which part of the project they are related to, and what are the measures you are planning to use in order to mitigate. And then what you see here is a typical Gantt chart, is about your approach, how to split into different work packages. Here there are already 7. Sometimes you don't need to have that many as 7. Sometimes 4 or 5 maximum work packages are more than enough. And that's what the EIC Accelerator suggests. Make it simple, keep it simple. Summary table about them, including sometimes who are the people responsible, what is the person months suggested, and one important aspect, if this is an activity going on TRL 9, meaning in market deployment, then this part cannot be covered by grant, and it needs to be covered by the equity scheme of EIC Accelerator. Here is a typical template of how you describe a work package. And of course, with respect to your deliverables, 2 things about deliverables. Deliverables keep them as little as possible in terms of number for every work package. And then the type of deliverable can be a report, but it can also be a demonstrator or a software code or a patent or anything else. But the dissemination level of the deliverable is also important, because you have public deliverables, the ones who you like to share with everybody. You have the confidential ones, the ones that are trade secret of your company, you want to keep it for yourself. And of course, you have the classified, the ones that you can share with some particular cases of users. These are important aspects you need to take into account when you're describing your projects. Milestones. Think of milestones as control points. Control points, not only external for the EC to understand what you're doing, but also control points for you internally, for you to measure the success of your project. You need to have a few number of milestones defined, but again, you don't need to overcomplicate. Keep things simple and easy to understand. Nobody gets impressed these days by over-elaborate structures. And then, of course, you have the annexes, security and ethics. If you are dealing with topics which have security and ethics requirements, you need to pay extra attention on this, but I think you already know that by now. The CVs of the team, any other document you would like to put, like letters of support, letters of intent. The financials, the tables, we will see about them in the next webinar. And of course, the pitch deck. With respect to the pitch deck, we discussed the previous type. And thanks, Philip, for bringing this into my attention, that in the second stage, the pitch cannot change. You have one slide per heading. There are some particular topics we need to cover. I think we covered them more or less the previous time. But the one thing that is important is that at this time, your pitch and the second stage needs to be final. So just to sum up a little bit for the criteria, it's one important thing is the non-backability. We discussed the previous time that although your solution, your innovation, it has very high potential, it also has very high risk, and there are systematic failures in the financing system that does not allow your innovation to be funded through other traditional ways, like VC or bank finance. That your team is serious, that your team is committed, it has the technical, but also the business expertise needed to run. Remember what we say in this type of seminars, it's about, very often, it's about the jockey and not about the horse. And this is something that they for sure are going to closely examine when you're doing the interview. That's one of the main reasons they do the interview. They want to see the people. The availability of resources required, if you have the people, if you have the facilities, the networks, partners, subcontractors, etc. If the time frame is realistic, and if the implementation as a whole makes sense, if it reveals good housekeeping of the entrepreneurial team, if it reveals that people know what they're doing and how to get there. That was all from my side for the time being. I'm sure there will be questions, but I guess we keep them for the end. Am I correct, Philip?
Yep. I suggest we keep them to the end. There are quite a few coming through online, by the way. I've just been answering one or two of them. So we're creating quite a bit of interest. And we'll go through some of those answers towards the end. A little bit ahead of time, so that's good. It gives us more time for questions. I'd now like to hand over to Serkan, who will tell you about himself. We're delighted to have Serkan in the team. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Thank you very much.
And Serkan will give us an insight. He's done quite a bit of evaluation work and so on. So over to you, Serkan.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to share my screen first. Click, I guess it's all right. Now, can you see my screen and hear my voice?
Yep, we're okay.
Thank you. So this is a great training, actually, full of information from different experts from all over the world. So it's very hard to contribute even more, but I will try to do my best and share some of my experiences as an expert evaluator for the last 8 years for European Commission. Actually,
you're too modest, Serkan.
I'm currently a contracted EIC Accelerator evaluator, and I started my evaluations since the beginning of Horizon 2020 in 2014. So it's been 8 years, and I evaluated more than 700 proposals so far, including SME instrument, phase 1, phase 2, accelerated pilot, fast track to innovation. By the way, we don't have any fast track to innovation program in Horizon Europe. And many other programs, SME programs under Horizon 2020, some of them are even managed by regional organizations. In those times, European Commission gives the money to regional organizations, and they distribute the money, contracting their own evaluators and determining their own evaluation criteria. So I participated in those evaluations too. So broad experience, I'll do my best to share some tips and highlight some points, and I try to build a ground for Q&A session. So where the wisdom comes from? There is no inside information, or there is no secret information that we can share in these trainings. All the information we are giving actually are already public and published in websites, YouTube, or social media. Work program is already published. There are certain aspects, reference documents that needs to be published in the upcoming weeks, but the information we already have is already enough to prepare short applications 100%, and I believe 70% of the full application content is already the same as EIC Accelerator pilot proposal. The only difference will be you don't need to upload any PDF file as a proposal part B, but only you will need to answer some online questions, fill in boxes, and check some buttons. So I already also suggest you follow social media accounts of EIC, Executive Agency Task Force, and TÜBİTAK Horizon Europe, because you can even ask questions to European Innovation Council, and they reply online your particular questions related to your own proposal. And these are the target calls to this topic. We have Accelerator Open, Green Deal Innovations, and Strategic Digital and Health Technologies calls. They are already open, but currently you are not allowed to apply for full applications because you are not eligible. Once your short application is approved and receive go, then you will be eligible applicant. So this is similar to being an SME or not, or being from a European country, an associated country or not. So this system is not open yet as well. Currently, you don't have to pick any challenge calls, or you don't have to differentiate your proposal based on the calls. All these call links will lead you to call texts, which includes the scope of program, eligibility conditions, and there is also a start submission button. When you click that start submission button when you are ready, you will access to AI platform. Here is the link, accelerator.aesmea.eu. And here you will first discover funding opportunities. When you click discover funding opportunities, you need to enter some keywords. And if you enter SME innovation, you will be directed to this page. And then you will fill out some online forms to diagnose whether your innovative project is really innovative or whether the call you selected is the appropriate one for your innovation. Then you will be directed to enter the exact information to complete your short or full application. So this is my dashboard. This was your dashboard entry point, and this is my dashboard. Once you enter your proposal, short or full, it will be listed here until Agora. Agora is the name of the evaluation management dashboard. It looks like an AI platform name like Alexa, but not. It's evaluation management dashboard. If you hear Agora, it means evaluation, not applicant's dashboard. So we have, just to give you practical information, we have 4 days to evaluate each short applications. And once we complete the evaluations, you will receive our responses. Now, I'd like to remind a few points. Short applications, evaluations just started 1 week ago. So the call was opened since April 9th. So we are 20 days behind. So you will receive your responses a little bit late, and you will have very minimum time to complete your full proposals online. But you should start your full proposal application drafting, writing your proposal as soon as possible, so that you can have enough time to finalize it when the EIC finally share the actual questions and answers, evaluation criteria. So you don't need to upload any proposal part B. So there was a question about business planning and commercialization. Actually, EIC used business plan not as a separate document that you need to upload in addition to your application. Business plan means, in a generic sense, overall your application. So you will enter the information in your business plan in your mind to under separate questions. In online form, there are questions about marketing. So you will maybe cut and paste, or maybe you will receive some excerpts from your business planning in your Word document and put it in your online boxes. Under marketing, a different paragraph, a different graph. Under commercialization, a different paragraph. So overall, your full application will constitute your business plan. So there is no separate business plan or commercialization plan. I believe commercialization plan is included in your business plan if you didn't have a full proposal application for EIC, because commercialization means market launch, market expansion, sales, distribution, delivery, and growth. But business plan may also need financing needs, funding, human resources, maybe more in depth, etc. So there is no scoring anymore. We will not give you a score on a 15-point scale. You will only go or no-go votes. In short applications, 2 go is enough to pass the stage. And you will have also access to 3 days coaching. This is not a mandatory one, but it's very suggested. You only have access to this 3-day coaching support once. So please benefit from it. And in feedbacks from 4 evaluations, in the past we had evaluation summary reports, and they didn't include any actual comments specific to your proposal. It was generic scores and generic score statements. And there was also consensus reports for fast-track innovation, for instance. But there is no one evaluation summary report for short applications or full applications. You will receive 4 evaluations from 4 different individuals. And in certain times, some comments may criticize you, some comments may praise you on the same evaluation criteria. So it's up to you how to deal with those different views. And if you go from short applications, you have 1 year to submit your full applications. So you just don't try your chance if you don't have full application in your mind. Ideally, you already need to have a full application, a project going on in the company. You need to be developing your technology. You need to be in at least technology readiness level 5. So this is an ongoing process already. Otherwise, 2 weeks or 3 weeks isn't enough to pass from short application to full application. So currently, full application submission process isn't ready yet in the portal, AI-based IT system. Once it's ready, you need to receive go votes from all 3 evaluators. Unlike short applications, full applications will be evaluated based on 3 main criteria. In short applications, we only give 1 go or no go. In full applications, we will focus on more in detail in every criteria and score them by go or no go votes several times. So you need to receive go from all 3 evaluators in all 3 criteria. If you can receive that go votes, then you will pass the jury interview stage. Currently, no fast track or plug-in options in effect now, so you cannot directly pass from a national funded research grant projects to accelerator full application. Or if you are a transition or Pathfinder beneficiary, you cannot go to full application as well. So in terms of resubmissions, please be careful that resubmission is monitored by applicant's PIC number, participant identification code, not by project. So when your project is rejected, and I hope it's not, you can submit another project within 1 year, but you cannot submit a different project just because it's rejected and you have enough resubmission rights. So please start drafting your proposal as soon as possible. So what are the a few things that EIC look for? As previously mentioned in training, it's first innovation. It has to be breakthrough, disruptive, high risk, and market creating. It could be green or deep tech, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any areas of research fields or innovations or industries. And team is very important, not only during jury interview, but starting from short application. You don't have to have the entire team members ready in your company yet, but at least you need to define the roles and positions and their responsibilities and your expectations, their contribution from them, and how to hire them during the project duration. And your commercial potentials is certainly a must that you need to highlight in your proposal. And justification for EC support is already out there. You know, non-bankability was very popular during EIC Accelerator pilot. Currently, EIC doesn't prefer to use non-bankability term, but evaluation criteria still mentions about justification of EC support, importance of that, and how that is vital for your project. So you still need to go through VC money raising efforts, and you should be rejected maybe, or you should have co-investors, but the investment amount they are ready to give in your project may not be enough for you for equity supported project duration. So you can still get support from EC. You don't have to have currently revenue. It's fine. It's part of non-bankability maybe, but justification is very important. It's a separate evaluation criterion. And even if your project isn't related to Green Deal objectives, remember those 8 goals cited under Green Deal at European Commission's website. You don't have to serve them, but at least you don't need to do any harm on any environmental, economic, or social aspects. And gender balance, regardless of where the innovation or project comes from, the founder might be female or not, or employees may be female or not, or your innovation's target market could be mostly females. These are all important issues in terms of gender balance. You need to highlight them. But evaluation criteria, whether it's short application, full application, or jury interview, all the same for female founders, male founders, and etc. So your accelerator proposal is totally your responsibility. So you cannot delegate the responsibility of writing your proposal. You can benefit from us, TÜBİTAK as a national contact point, or other consultants, evaluators, experts, but eventually your proposal, your project is yours. Especially during jury interview, the jury may notice that this proposal is written by professional experts, and your credibility may lower down immediately. So you should own your proposal, and you should be satisfied with your proposal writing, and you cannot leave your project development to your proposal writer, even within your team. So all your team should be united around your proposal, and they should contribute to its writing and project development. So your accelerated proposal as a commitment to European Commission with milestones. This is very important because European Commission will track the progress of your project based on milestones. You will list several milestones, and whether you can achieve those milestones will be very important to release the rest of the amount of the grant or equity support. Both the grant and equity support will not be given to you all at once. It will be divided into at least 2 or 3 tranches. So based on your project progress, you will be accessing more money from European Commission as a grant or investment. And think of your proposal, that's why, as a commitment. Your work packages, tasks, deliverables, your team, and your actions to develop your project, finalize your commercialization. It's all a commitment, and your proposal will be attached to your grant agreement as well as investment agreement, and you will be expected to achieve all those goals and deliver those outputs. So it's not a prize application. In prize application or award application, you list your previous achievements and you ask for money or certification on, or any kind of award or little bit of money maybe. And all those evaluation criteria are related to your previous achievements. But in grant applications, your future promises are more important than your previous achievements. Of course, they are all important to give you credibility, to persuade evaluators whether you can achieve your future goals or not. But please pay more attention to future of your company than past history. And your proposal is somewhere between your project and your tech. For example, you have a company, SME, and you employ 20 people, and maybe only 3 or 4 of them constitute key team members, and they will work on your innovation. So your company isn't the same as your project. Even if you fund your company for certain particular one single project, your team members will still be involved in some accounting. Maybe they will looking for some new offices, headquarters. Maybe they will be looking for some additional funding from other resources, etc., etc. So they can spend only 70 or 80% of their time for the project, even in companies with one single project. So this is also very important about timesheets and how to allocate staff to certain tasks. We can talk about this in detail later on if you have any questions. Your technology development is also not equal to your innovation, because technology is only one part. To make it in an innovation, you should also relate that technology with certain customer needs. So business, market, and economic benefits and finance will complete your technology development efforts to make it an innovation one. So you should create a business plan document for investors. They are looking for people who wants to make money, not creating new theories. So it's not a scientific paper. Of course, you can refer to scientific research, your previous or public research you can find online, or other journals, etc. Or your innovation can be based on your research, and it could be a hardcore science, a deep tech, but still your business plan audience is investors. That's a very important aspect. You need to differentiate your proposal for different grant organizations, for instance. For example, you can have a certain project for certain innovation. You need to develop that product, but once it becomes a funding application, for TÜBİTAK, you can develop a different proposal. For EIC, you need to develop a different proposal and customize it for European Commission requirements. And if you want to apply for funding from COSGAP, for instance, you need to have a different proposal for different sections, different budget items of the same innovation. So this is very important. So if you apply with the same proposal that you sent to TÜBİTAK to EIC, you might be rejected, but your innovation project could be a very good one, actually. Think of this like a product market fit. You have an innovation behind, and you need to have a proposal for certain target grant organization. So customize your project as a proposal for the right target. In this situation, European Innovation Council. So going on that, your proposal should change customers' lives. So once you complete your project, at least in the first 2 years, you need to deliver a product or service. You need to start satisfying your customers, at least pilot customers. You don't need to create a lot of documents, deliverables. Some applicants list 20, 30 deliverables. Most of them are midterm reports, market studies, market reports, in-depth market studies, first market, initial market, draft market. This is too much and unnecessary. Focus on tangibles. For example, if TRL 6 is a requirement for European Innovation Council, then some deliverables or milestones could be related to TRL 7, 8, and 9. Some prototypes might be very important. Market launch is very important. Entering a country for the first time is very important. Reaching 1 millionth customer is very important. So you shouldn't focus on creating documents, scientific papers, or discovering new areas of research field. And you shouldn't be asking for more grant money from EIC or other institutions. Of course, you will always need funding, but most of the time you should be able to get it from revenue or investors. If you apply for a grant again and again, you are not an entrepreneur, but a serial grant applicant, I believe. So you could be a serial entrepreneur, but not a grant applicant. So in the end, your accelerator proposal to be persuasive enough could be consistent, conscious, comprehensive, evidence-based. So avoid from vague, assumptive, and abstract statements, never-ending discussions, conceptual definitions, and put it in tangible context as much as possible. So we have two different applications. Full application isn't ready yet. You already know about short application, and full application will be, even though it's called business plan, it's not just one question and answer. Please upload your business plan, or please include your business plan in below box. There will be around maybe 20 questions, and you will distribute your business plan among those questions reasonably, understandably, and there will be work packages and budget boxes. So you will have 10-slide pitch deck in short application, and you are allowed to upload another 10-slide pitch deck in full application. So you could change that. Ideally, short application will be evaluated 100% remotely, so it could be more self-explanatory. So you could include more text, you could include more information, or whatever you have in your mind. We can talk about that later. But in full application, it could be more visual, more effective, impressive, because you will be the person doing the interview, and that pitch deck will be supportive. That's all. But during short application, it will be all as is without you next to it. So while drafting your proposal, keep yourself updated on the EIC Accelerator Program. You can refer to us, National Contact Point, or the references that I listed in the beginning of my presentation. They will be all updated in the upcoming weeks. They already updated guide for applicants that they published 1 month ago, and they updated 1 week ago. And as time goes by, they also revised some evaluation criteria. At least they reconstruct this evaluation criteria statements, so they're already important. And so write as your competitors would read your proposal. Sometimes people, especially regarding competition, they underestimate the competition's value offerings, but they overestimate the importance and effectiveness of their own innovations. So please avoid from this. And one tip to avoid from this, you can write them as your competitors would read it. Think about this. If your competitors read your evaluation application, what would they think? Would they be agree with you or criticize you, or would they laugh maybe? I mean, you can also have them read by your team members. So you can ask for peer evaluation from other experts, team members, other people in different departments in your country, or from your friends. And when you attend trainings, face-to-face or online, if you meet new people, if they can be trustable, reliable in terms of the information you are giving to them, please share your opinion, idea, business idea, and operation concerns with everyone you know as much as possible. They will contribute to your project, definitely. And as a team, you should unite around the proposal. Sometimes there are too many people in the company, and some of them don't even know whether some people in different country departments apply for an EIC funding. They only know it once the funding is secured. Sometimes key team members in your project hide their project from other people in the company or anybody else, just to keep it secret. Once the project is funded, then they share. In the worst case, they start to receive their teammates, co-workers' support once the EIC support is granted. But actually, this shouldn't happen. Normally, the team members should develop the project with all the people in the company, and they should all be united around the proposal and project. They should focus their time and energy on this project. Only then you can be a trustable, reliable team. Teammates should be also loyal to each other. they should support each other, and jury member will first focus on whether team members are loyal to each other, dedicated to your project. And as I said, give equal importance on every aspect of technology, finance, and marketing. You could be a researcher, you could be a professor, or former CEO, experienced European Commission executive. They usually focus on technology more than anything else because they think if they can develop technology well enough, the customers would buy it. But this may be the case, or this may not be the case, but in any case, you should develop your financial projections, marketing plans, commercialization plan, and you should document all in your full application so that the audience can know as well as you about your project. Remember Grigoris's quote, if you want to jump off a cliff and you can open your parachute on your way down, then it means you are an entrepreneur, high-risk entrepreneur. But at least you should show in your full application that you have a parachute with you that you can open on your way down. If you don't even have a parachute with you, it's not a good entrepreneurial spirit. This is committing suicide. And consider the changes in the world over time. Some people write the proposal only for the date they submit the proposal or at the cutoff date. So what does it mean? They compare their future upcoming product features with their competitors' current features. So you should also take emerging products, innovations, and competitors' offerings into consideration over time, at least in 2 years, 3 years, because you will be launching your product in 2 years, maybe 3-4 years later, and your future goals is compared to competitors' current situation in the current ecosystem. So be careful about that. And organize your thoughts. Do your brainstorming in your company before the proposal presentation. So you should finalize your thoughts. You could have alternative options, different strategies, and you can list your assumptions to decide which strategy is the best during your project duration. You don't have to finalize everything. You don't have to make every decision before presentation and submission. But at least you could accompany them with your assumptions or alternative scenarios and the criteria how to decide which way to go, and risks and mitigations. And you should check again on your own or with your teammates, and you should finalize and perfect your proposal, because you know, there are 2,000 applications at every cutoff. Only 1% of 5% of them will be funded. So why do you think yours should be different, is different? And why do you think you should be funded rather than your colleagues in this event, for instance? So submit your proposal only when you are fully satisfied with it, and only when you can really believe in that you can make all the promises, keep all those promises during the project time. Of course, you can always change some work packages or tasks during the project time, because you can have options to make amendment requests. For example, you can transfer some budget items from some money from certain budget items to others, or you can delete some tasks, add additional tasks, as long as you keep milestones unchanged. Or if you can justify, you can even change milestones during the project time in 2 years, or during equity supported 2, 3, 4, maybe 7 years. But even in that case, even in that option in your mind, please submit your proposal only when you are and your team fully satisfied, because you will be evaluated by critical jury members and remote evaluators, and they will not know about those amendment options beforehand. So I'm going to give you a few tips and share some information about what the most important aspects of impact, excellence, and implementation sections. First, let's go through impact. For impact, short application evaluation criteria are only related to 2 parts: scale-up potential and broader impact. even if you are also requested to give information about financing type that you request or your team members or implementation duration, etc., you will be focusing on, and evaluators will be focusing on scale-up potential and broader impact under impact criteria. So you can talk about competitor analysis, and you were already asked in short applications, but they were only important to show that you will be able to scale up. So they are not a separate evaluation criteria as on their own. So there is a growth versus scaling dilemma. Growth is very important. EIC wants all the beneficiaries grow as fast as possible. They want them create new jobs. But there's also a scaling issue. So you should keep your growth projections and growth operations as long as you can also scale in the industry. What does it mean? For instance, you can design your organization and standardize your processes to keep your fixed cost lower, depending on the situation, economic or variables. You can focus on limited replicated costs, or you can benefit from digitalization to be able to scale your business model. So you can also focus on break-even points. Let me remind you, in terms of this break-even point, one thing is very important. Some applicants disregard investment R&D costs or grant money from their return on investment and break-even calculations. For instance, you as an applicant invested in this project maybe 2 years, maybe 1 million euros before the cutoff date. Please don't ignore that time and money, and don't exclude that from return on investment calculations. Just because the grant money is free, that includes EIC money, grant part, doesn't mean that you don't need to expect anything return from that grant money. It should be included in investment part too. So when you need to progress projects monitoring, there are some growth metrics and vanity metrics. For example, revenue is very important, but the cost to make that revenue is more important. Profit is important, but profitability may be more important, because over time you need scaling, not always growth. To be able to grow always, you need investment, always investment. But if you can increase your profitability over time, the cost of production costs, cost of customer acquisition over time, then it means you can scale. You should discuss that scaling strategies in your proposal to persuade evaluators. For example, customer search may be important, paying customers may be more important, loyal customers may be more important. Do you have a method to track these indicators, performance metrics? Which ones are more important to your business? Website clicks may be important, but clicks that lead to sales may be more important. It's up to you and your project. And whichever are more important you think, then focus on them. List 4, 7, 10 growth metrics and track them whether you can grow in those metrics rather than just vanity metrics. Some numbers always grow, but they don't mean anything in terms of revenue, profits, or sustainability of your project. So most of the time, applicants list their product and their certain product features, maybe 4, 5, or 7 at the most, and they compare those product features with those of the competitors. It's a good option, and almost 80% of the applicants use this communication style or competitor analysis model, I would say. But there's also broader view on competition that I want to share with you. Even if you don't share a table like this in your proposal, please keep this broader view on competition in your mind while drafting your competitor comparison tables or discussions in your proposal. For instance, let's say you're a car manufacturer producing cars for transportation needs, and your new model is Peugeot 208. So when you look at competition, there are same value categories. There are other brands like Hyundai and Ford. And they have similar offerings like i20 that could be in the same car segment like Peugeot 208, but there are also different options like Ford Ranger. Most people, applicants, limit their competitor analysis within this section, value proposition, yours, and the same value category. But there are also alternative solutions that you need to pay attention. Some people prefer to, take a taxi or use public transportation or car sharing economy solutions like Uber or any other solutions that people may come up in the upcoming years. So you need to pay attention to those alternative solutions when you develop yours. It will be affecting your growth projections, financial projections, maybe your pricing or number of cars sold in the next 2 years. And there are also another option, walking and bicycle, almost non-consumption. Some people may consider buying a new car, but then when they look at your car's features and maybe technical support, dealers, maybe other issues, then they may just try to keep going with walking or hitchhiking or non-commuting or bicycle. You should consider all these issues and competition aspects to really have something solid in your mind regarding your position in the ecosystem and your market's interest to your product. And some people even prefer to go for education, MBA, or invest in stock market with the money they allocated for the new car. And I see many people, they give up from buying laptop, for instance, and they go with new Apple iPhone. So it's time and budget competition. It's about design thinking. It's about putting yourself in your customer's shoes. So think about your customer's daily life and the ecosystem, competitors, and the life in general when you think about competition and whether your solution is significant as you think they are, or whether your solution can be a complete 100% solution, or whether you need to focus on certain market segments and for certain use cases. So let's go to excellence. For excellence, the most important part is technology readiness levels and eligible cost. Minimum technology readiness level is usually cited as 6, but you can be working on your TRL 5 activities as well, because there's a time between cutoff date and grant agreement date. So European Commission doesn't want to dismiss people working on their projects hardly, and they don't want to eliminate them from evaluation process just because they are at TRL 5. You can be working on TRL 5 currently, and in 6 months, when you are happen to sign your grant agreement or investment agreement, you can achieve TRL 6. If you can foresee this timeline for your project, you can apply with TRL 5 as long as you are keeping working on your project and technology progress, and you can outline technology progress steps in your proposal. So grants, as you know, only support technology readiness level 6, 7, and 8 activities. So they are eligible costs like planning, prototyping, demonstrating. And TRL 9 activities like commercialization, marketing, advertising, warehousing, distribution are not eligible costs for grant. So you should differentiate those TRL 9 activities in your work packages, and you should potentially create a separate work package for these commercialization and equity support to TRL 9 operations in your proposal, so that evaluators clearly know that you have TRL 9 activities are outlined and their funding resource is secured, or if not secured, they will be reimbursed by equity rather than grant money. So for instance, you cannot put cost of goods sales or advertising expenses under TRL 6 and 8 activities. But for piloting, for instance, if you need pilot customers, you can always benefit from online advertising, for instance, to a certain limit, as long as they are pilot customers, as long as your advertising money goes to acquiring customers for pilots, so they will not be paying, only experiencing the product and maybe share their opinion, feedback with you, so that you can develop the product even further. But beyond that, if you start making revenue, and to make revenue, you need advertising, branding, marketing, and that part of the commercialization operations expenses are not eligible. So this assessment will be done by remote evaluators like us and jury members during interview. If you misplace TRL-9 activities in your proposal, we will propose jury members, and jury members will propose if you need equity to investment fund, EIC investment fund, and they will replace and transfer the amount you put under grant supported work packages to TRL-9 activities. So the amount of grant requested by you will be lowered to cover only eligible costs. Keep that in mind. Even if you receive Go, you might receive less money than you requested initially. And it comes to IP. As you know, there are a few issues with IP protection and IP capitalization. You need to protect your IP. You need to show your awareness about these IP protection methods, and you need to pick the ones that are suitable to your innovation. You could have patent or not. You could only benefit from non-disclosure agreements and trade secrets or not. It's up to you. As long as you justify your IP protection method and you follow it through, your IP criteria will always receive Go, like this one. These are examples from potentially 2 winning proposals. One of them is granted 5 patents for its innovation. The other one just preferred to invest in innovation continuously to always remain state of the art. So they think even if you have patents, competitors always find a way to play around that patent, and they can always find a better solution. So patent cannot protect your commercialization or cannot guarantee new customers for you. So they just prefer to invest in innovation and new developments, new improvements. Only then they think they can stay up to date and they can compete with the competitors. It's up to you. As long as you explain and justify your choices and strategies, all strategies are acceptable in terms of IP protection or capitalization as listed here. You can pick whatever growth path you like, as long as you justify consistently throughout your proposal. And here there are another 2 examples. They prefer licensing for IP capitalization, and they are both successful. So in terms of implementation, the final and one of the most important points are the need for union support. So you don't need to be completely non-bankable, because that non-bankable term was very confusing for many evaluators and applicants. So they don't use non-bankability term as per se, but they still mention about non-bankability. For instance, you need to go through some VCs. You need to show some efforts to raise money from banks or VC companies or other grant organizations. And that money that you can find shouldn't be enough for your innovation, even if the innovation is very good and appreciated by the audience you faced before. Their money shouldn't be enough for you so that you can ask for EIC money. You can have co-investors, or you can have some investors only provides money for your project as long as EIC also supports it. These are good points, and these are very persuasive. It gives you credibility. It shows your efforts to raise money. But because they are not enough and your project is high risk and you need patient capital as well, you still need EIC. Okay. And one thing I want to mention about budgeting is equipment and fixed asset costs. I know some applicants just killing their projects because of these equipment costs, misleading budgeting. So when you want to buy equipment or fixed assets, and what are they? For instance, if office equipment, machinery, or IT infrastructure, which are highly expensive and whose economic use lifetime is more than 2 years, you can only declare their depreciation costs. Don't forget about that. If you buy an equipment for 100K euros, for instance, and its useful life is 5 years, you cannot get 100K from European Commission because your project duration is 2 years and you can only use that equipment for the project only 2/5 of its price. And even further, if you don't use it fully throughout the whole project, for instance, if it's a test equipment and if you use it only once in 3 months, for instance, or if you only use it for 6 months, as written in this example, you can allocate only 10K in the budget for 100K machinery. Remember that. So some people just prefer to rent such high-cost machines that are usable for many years. If the renting or leasing is less expensive than this reimbursable price, then you can prefer go with renting and leasing. If you have additional detailed questions, I can answer on this equipment price calculation, depreciation costs. And another important part is subcontracting. Actually, subcontracting is maybe more important than any other evaluation criterion because we don't give score or go no-go for this criterion. We only answer yes or no. If you receive no, your project is eliminated immediately without any other criteria. Even if the innovation is good, market is good, financial projection is good, subcontracting may lead project rejection immediately. So basic rules about subcontracting. You can subcontract any part of the project, any percent of the budget, or you can select your subcontractors before or after the proposal submission. As long as you explain subcontracted tasks in work packages and their estimated cost and other details. You need to have a competitive subcontractor selection procedure, whether you choose them before or after proposal. And each subcontracted task should be detailed under work packages. Don't forget that. So you cannot just write a work package with 2 tasks and then subcontract 3 tasks under that work package or vice versa. So you cannot subcontract project coordination and core innovation. So you should own and manage your own innovation project. You can benefit from consultants or other organizations to manage your coordination or to let them exchange information with the program managers in Brussels, but you should still be leading your project. You cannot, for example, subcontract subcontractor management process. Some applicants just say, I don't know how to subcontract certain tasks. I don't know how to manage a bidding process. So I will hire a subcontractor manager as a company, as a subcontractor. And this is not a good idea. Here are 2 examples that work. You should first explain subcontracting is a must. Your team isn't enough for that task, and it's not a good idea to hire new people for just 3 months for this certain task. So subcontracting is the only way to go. And you should also convince evaluators about the pricing and performance criteria of subcontractors. Then you are good to go. You can look at these examples in details. And now comes the jury interview, finally. There are maximum 6 jury members at the desk asking questions to you, and they will already be informed about your short and full applications and their evaluations. And so they are full of information and facts about your project. So you need to impress them by your presence. You will be able to deliver a speech, 10-minute presentation with maximum 10 slide pitch deck, and it will be already there, uploaded before with your full application. And then you will reply open-ended questions. There is no preset, predetermined that we can share, questions that we can share with you. But in less than 30 minutes, you will be ready to answer all kinds of questions, and they will come up with evaluation summary report. Unlike short or full applications evaluations, you will receive one evaluation summary report. A consensus will be reached, and you will have go or no go. So you should appeal the jury with your trustability and talent and your passion. You should be dedicated to proposal, and they should rely on you, and they will further ask questions about the details if they have any suspicions, or if your TRL, for instance, definitions and allocations under work packages are misleading or confusing. They may clarify this with you so that they can propose a transfer for EC fund or not. And you will negotiate your grant investment agreement with EIC fund, not with the jury, although the jury has a right to propose some opinion about your company valuation, milestones, etc. But if they have any question in mind, they will ask you. It's not the right time and place for you to initiate such discussion with the jury members. It's too early. And one thing that I give really much importance to is avoiding prioritizing jury above your customers. Don't say anything just to satisfy jury members, although you think otherwise, for the sake of your customers and project. And when you look at your project from markets, competitors, and customers' perspective, if you believe in something else, just say it, explain and justify, and defend your arguments. And practice your pitch. Be prepared for the unexpected moments. This interview could be face-to-face or online, so you could be prepared for both. And your internet connection can be disrupted, or during jury interview, you might have some criticism or negative feedback. Don't go emotional. Prepare for everything. Prepare for every type of questions from all course of life. So, I mean, they can even ask your daily life and how dedicated you are to your project as well. So you know about the pitch deck already from Philip's and Grigory's presentations, but I put it here. If I receive any questions, that we can go through this pitch deck. Finally, as I said for the jury interview, what works for the project works for evaluators. You don't need to keep evaluators in mind always. Keep the evaluation criteria next to your proposal, put them side by side, but don't think that evaluators would want to see something in a certain way. We don't want to see certain financial numbers, certain levels of growth projections, or we don't have something strict in our mind to give a go or no go. So it's up to you. You can prefer fast growth or slow growth. You can launch your product in 1 market or 5 markets. I mean, it's up to you. You can pick whatever alternative commercialization strategy you want, as long as you can explain, justify consistently throughout your proposal. If you put high growth projections in your financial document, but if your commercialization planning is limited, then they are not inconsistent, they are not persuasive. But if you put high goals and you can show that you can achieve them with your operations, with your team, then it's fine. And don't think Turkish entrepreneurs are negatively discriminated. We have equal opportunity to access grant money, access funding resources among other European organizations. I mean, don't think your English is not good enough. Don't think Turkey is discriminated because of some issues between EU and us. So most people don't even know where the applicant is from. I mean, some foreigners build companies, found companies in other countries. Some people live in one country, but they don't even sell in their own home country. They always export. There are different situations. So don't underestimate your capability and skills. And And one last thing that I want to share, there's a time and place for every innovation. When I look at, again, car manufacturing industry, I see, for instance, Toyota and Ferrari or Aston Martin. Toyota sells 10 million cars in a year, and Aston Martin or Rolls-Royce have sold only 1,000 cars during their entire business life, which is 100 years, for instance. So there are times that serial production, lean management are good for certain industries and products, certain value propositions, and there are certain target markets that can afford Ferrari or Rolls-Royce handmade, unique, customized car. So you can find that spot, product market fit and profitability spot for your innovation and share it with EIC. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you the best, good luck, and I'm ready to take any question of yours for today or later.
Okay, Serkan, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Rolls-Royce is far better, of course. I would say that, and I don't have one. We have a few minutes for questions in Turkish or English. We're very happy to receive them in either language. We've already been dealing with questions online. Please send us more if you have them. Now's the time to ask. One important thing that Serkan mentioned there that we didn't mention earlier is this gender balance. It's becoming a very important issue with the Commission bids, and particularly with accelerators. So important to take account of it. And there will be special initiatives, I think, on gender balance alongside Green Deal and so on. Whilst we're waiting for questions, there are so far 20 questions. I'll have a quick sprint through and ask my colleagues if they have any comments. The first one, is it for individual researchers? Is Accelerator for individual researchers? No, not really. If it's a startup business based on research, Accelerator welcomes startups. But if you're looking at research funding, then you should look at the collaborative research funding, which is on Europa quite extensively. And you may be able to link up with other partners in other countries on the topic of interest. The eternal question, will the United Kingdom be involved in Accelerator? I'm delighted to say, of course, that it will. The status is different. The question was based on, is it better to apply from a Turkish company or a UK company? It's one that shares the same ownership. Turkey, of course, is an accession country, whereas the UK, I guess, is a recession country in the sense that it's only associated now with the EU, but it will participate in all of the Horizon Europe stuff, so it's there. The only thing it won't do is to be involved in the EIC investment fund for loan and equity, because the United Kingdom government, in their infinite wisdom, have decided not to get involved in the financial instruments. We've been asked, what is disruptive technology? Again, we've given one or two examples. The one that I think people are tired of hearing now is, I use the camera. The camera for years had mechanical technology and film. There were incremental changes. The first stage, when we had roll film and cassette film, and a few step changes like light metering and adjustable lenses. But the real disruptive technology came with the mobile phone, of course. And none of the big camera companies, and they were big at the time, Kodak and Polaroid, lots of others, didn't see the mobile phone coming as disruptive, and in fact never invested in mobile phones. Sony very lately invested, but not that successfully in Nokia. So there are lots of examples. And as I mentioned in my presentation, the battery or the electric car, there are different levels of disruption in there as well. Any comments, gentlemen?
I have one. I would like us to think, when it comes to disruption, I would like us to think of disruption in the broader picture, how disruption works in the economy. Disruptive is a word that before the startups made it popular, it used to have a negative meaning. Am I correct, Philip?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Disruptive means something that destroys. Actually, a disruptive innovation, although it's very good for the one who invented it, it's in fact an innovation that destroys pre-existing value networks. Imagine Airbnb that made a very strong hit to the business of travel agencies, hotels, etc. Imagine, for example, to take you to the hardware, imagine the disruption that iPods, when they were hot, did to many cassette players, Walkman, CD-mans, whatever. And imagine how the iPhone disrupted iPod, because now with the capacity of iPhones to hold music or other mobile phones to hold music, iPod is now obsolete. So disruption essentially means stopping existing value networks. And that's why big companies are not very good in disruptive innovation. That's why you, SMEs, are good in disrupting innovation, because the big companies have the CEOs and the CFOs of the big companies need first to see their full investment in large infrastructure of traditional investments pay off before they go into the next. So if they have a very disruptive innovation, they might have a motive to keep it in the drawer than launch it in the market. That's why we want startups and SMEs to be the ones that are launching disruptive innovations.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When is disruption actually advancement? You know, you could call it advancing in technology, but that does disrupt others. The question on what is a pitch deck, we've covered that, I think. And what's in the 3-minute video, again, we covered that in the earlier event. But the Commission's view on that is it's a very simple 3-minute, up to 3-minute, by the way. 3 minutes is quite a long time in a video. A TV commercial's around 30 seconds to get the message over, but it's to introduce the team and the idea, and for the team to enthuse about the idea. But that doesn't mean it's up to 3 people. It doesn't mean 3 people spending 1 minute talking about how well qualified they are academically. It has to be eye-catching, wow factor, and all the rest, which was mentioned in the presentation in at the 28th of April. Again, any comments, gentlemen? No, okay. Someone asked, what's the difference between commercialization and a business plan? I would say that commercialization is part of the business plan. It's part of your marketing strategy. And if you're preparing a business plan, you must be showing in there how you intend to commercialize your product and win market share and make profit and produce at a profit and all the rest. It's part of business planning. Quite a long question about the funding levels on other parts of Accelerator. We didn't cover these in great depth, but the other 2 parts are Pathfinder, EIC Pathfinder, and EIC Transitions, and they too will have open calls and specific calls. Really, because it's not that relevant to our audience, but very quickly, both have 100% funding for R&D. Pathfinder is really based on collaborative research, based on a consortium from at least 3 independent legal entities, one of which must be a member state. The others can be associated countries. And it's to look at radically new science and taking it through to technological breakthrough, future vision stuff. It's what used to be future and emerging technologies. So you'd have to be very convincing in a bid, and it is collaborative research. It's not for individuals. The EIC Transitions, again, really is to develop beyond that. So it's taking previous projects for future and emerging technologies and Research Council funding and taking them through to commercialization, again, using a team of researchers, but it can be an individual SME. So they're very specific and they're well detailed in the EIC Work Programme 2021, which is available online. So if you have an interest in that, please go for it. Any comments, gentlemen? No, there's not much gender balance. We're all gentlemen today. Sorry, Serkan.
Your answer was comprehensive enough. I don't have anything.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
I don't want to go to theoretical discussions because all the evaluators and jury members will be real-world private investors, actually working in private VC companies, or they are serial entrepreneurs. So they are not much interested in what for instance, Dr. Clayton Christensen would say about disruptive innovation.
Okay.
I mean, if you can provide a product at 10 times better, faster, a better solution, and at a lower price, then you could say it's breakthrough, disruptive. Eventually, you cannot invent internet or blockchain or mobile phone every year. Every year, European Commission grants money to more than 200 companies. But an internet or blockchain can be invented maybe once in 20 years, right? So you don't have to put such high goals like changing the world all at once with one product in 2 years project duration.
Yeah, I mean, disruptive's a name, but they have to settle for, you know, the lower levels of perhaps incremental, step change, or perhaps even incremental sometimes. But it's a goal to have the disruptive ones, of course. And given that they have so many applications for what is a restricted fund, even though it's a very large amount, of course, they're very selective. And this is the reason that only a small percentage get through. But that doesn't matter. If your idea is disruptive and you can show that it's got market potential, it will get through regardless of where you're from and what you think your chances are. The other questions we had, can a textile company apply? It's available to all sectors and across all technologies. So the simple answer is yes. And again, the question went on to say, do we stand as much of a chance if we're producing hardware versus software? I would say the Commission are more ready to look at hardware-based technologies because they have so many software-based. But if you remember, I mentioned that investors are more reluctant to invest in hardware because it's riskier, it takes longer, and therefore it takes a longer time for them to get their money back. And of course, as always in all these projects, other people may be developing similar ideas and products elsewhere in the world. So the longer the time, the more the risk of not getting the investment back. There was a suggestion it would be good to have people who've successfully gone through the process. Of course, none at the moment with the Horizon Europe Accelerator, but there are some with Horizon 2020. We do invite guest speakers along to our physical events, and we'll certainly look at doing that to our project writing camp and see whether we can get someone along who can tell you about the pain and the pleasure of going through the bidding process. But it won't be about Horizon Europe Accelerator until probably next year. The suggestion was that TÜBİTAK should run such events. I don't know whether you have similar events, our TÜBİTAK representative, Merve or Tarek, do you have such events?
We are organizing some sort of events time to time, and we had 2 events last month together in cooperation with some other institutions. And in one of them, one of the successful projects from EIC pilot presented their project, and we are inviting them time to time. But as you mentioned, we don't have so much companies. We only have 2 companies from the EIC pilot, and we hope to have more in the EIC under Horizon Europe. But we are inviting them time to time. But to these events, yes, we can consider it again to invite these 2 projects.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we shall do so. Thanks for the suggestion. 1 or 2 ongoing questions about this business of researchers and startups. It's difficult to give an answer without seeing the actual situation. And if you'd like to contact us, then we can give a better view if you can give us more description. But the principle we've talked about, that the Commission are looking for a startup based on technology at TRL level 6 or better. So if you're looking at finding research funding this way, it is not a research fund. There's an element of grant to finish off the risky part of research to get it towards the market, but the focus is very much on a commercial product, not on funding research. Indeed, there are other national sources for that, as well as within, as I said, Pillar 1, the collaborative stuff, or the basic science. We've got other questions coming in, so a quick look. The question we get at every one of our events, is it possible to have a template for a proposal? There are templates that set out the different sections and what's needed and what can be covered, but there are no proposals as examples. People are often looking for a successful proposal, and dare I say that they can cut and paste and put their name in and win as well. That's not available. All the proposals are held in confidence. There is guidance, but it has to be about you and your product. There's no easy fix for this. It has to be written. You have to be part of it and engaged in that process to get the proposal through. So sorry, it's hard work, but it's well worth it if you're successful. It's well worth it even if you don't get the funding, because it means you've gone through an exercise as a business, as I mentioned, with business planning and strategy, to take a look at where you're going, how you're going to get there, what you're doing, and what you need to do as a business. So, and just the exercise of writing a proposal is a good exercise to go through. So please don't think it's time wasting. Any more comments or questions? Does the project have to start from TRL 6 at least? Yes, it does. Other funding is available elsewhere. Are the jury flexible with this issue? No, they're not. I think they're flexible with the fact that it may be part way through TRL level 6 or early on in TRL level 6 or well advanced, but that's as close as you'll get. But they're looking for something that has a clear future in the marketplace without doing too much funding. And the Commission of Peculiar Investors, they're looking to fund the element of risk that if it's successful, if it's solved, will then make the project attractive to commercial investors. That's it in a nutshell. I've talked a lot. Gentlemen, any more comments?
Well, I'd like to add something, actually,
Sure.
very simple one.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a suggestion to applicants about paying more attention to execution than idea. Your idea and your core team are evaluated during short application, and you pass short application, then you are preparing your full application, a business proposal, and give more place to execution, how you will deliver your product. Particularly during jury interview, it will be confirmed by jury members because your idea already evaluated. They already have many facts about your proposal and project. So they want to see the team because they want to verify the team is 100% behind the project and they are able to deliver the product. They are able to keep the promises they made in the proposal. So their passion, execution capability, organization, preparation, how they organize their commercialization activities and marketing strategies are now more important than the basic core value proposition idea, that business model concept on the paper. So everything may look great on paper, but when it comes to execution, most startups fail. So focus on more execution and how you can impress the jury members and full application evaluators by your execution capability and those aspects, dimensions related to that one. Deliver, not just developed idea. You were creative and they were rewarded during short application. Now it's time to deliver.
Thank you. That's good advice. We were at pains earlier to say it's not just a paper exercise. It's not just filling a form in and getting money. It's very different to that. And I mentioned the problem we do find where researchers have researched in a certain field, they've implemented, they have an idea, and then they look for a need. It's the other way around with the Commission. What's the need? Shows your clever idea, convinces you can implement it. And that shows more engagement from the start with a customer base rather than technology. Your final chance for questions, I think. We're a little bit beyond our closure time, but nobody's rushing anywhere. If you have any more questions, I don't see any more coming up. So hopefully we've satisfied a few queries. The line will stay open if you have more questions to feed in, please, in Turkish or English. We're happy to deal with both. Do you have any final comments, gentlemen? Lady and gentlemen, sorry, you're not on the screen, Merve, so I keep saying gentlemen. I do apologize. Any more comments, lady and gentleman? No?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, that's fine. So if I could hand over to my colleague Kemal to close the event. Thank you very much indeed for your participation today. I hope it's been of interest. Please remember that on the 21st of May, we have another event, the fourth in this cycle. Thank you, goodbye, and over to Kemal.
Thank you very much.
Ben de bize bugün vakit ayırıp katılan, etkinliği organize edilen TÜBİTAK yetkililerine teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Ayrıca yine katılan uzmanlarımıza. Umuyorum sizler de etkinliğimizi, proje yazma eğitimimizi faydalı ve bilgilendirici buldunuz. Daha önce de belirttiğimiz gibi etkinlik kaydı, etkinlikte gerçekleşen sunumlar, ayrıca sizlerin Q&A butonu aracılığıyla sormuş olduğu tüm yazılı sorulara verilen yazılı ve sözlü yanıtlar chat kısmında alıntıladığımız proje web sitesinde paylaşılacaktır. Bunu gün içinde yüklemeye çalışacağız. Ayrıca yine TÜBİTAK'ın web sayfasına da ilgili Ufuk 2020 programı ve Ufuk Avrupa ile ilgili tüm haberlere yine o sayfadan ulaşabilirsiniz. Filip'in de belirttiği gibi webinar önümüzdeki 15 dakika boyunca sorulara açık kalacaktır. Bugünkü etkinlikte zaman ayırıp bizlere katıldığınız için teşekkür ederiz. Yine önümüzdeki bahar ve yaz ayları içerisinde gerçekleşmesi planlanan tüm etkinliklerimize yine chat kısmında görebileceğiniz proje web sitesi aracılığıyla erişebilirsiniz. Görüşmek dileğiyle sağlıklı günler diliyorum ben de size.
Teşekkürler.